Hello everyone, subscribe to my channel to not miss new trending manhwa.
The dark-haired young man, clad in a tan jacket and a gray hoodie, found himself back in a desolate, rocky landscape, a sense of déjà vu washing over him as he murmured his return. A wave of melancholy swept over him as he took in the somber surroundings. A lone figure stood against the ethereal backdrop of Smoke Sky Island, a floating landmass adrift in a swirling haze. Ruined Western-style buildings dotted the island, hinting at a forgotten civilization lost to time. Amidst a desolate, crumbling landscape, the young man in the tan jacket surveyed the ruins, a chilling thought echoing in his mind. This place felt utterly devoid of any past life, as if existence itself had been erased. Drawing on the overarching narrative of Red Shirt, the scene begins with a sense of wonder and apprehension as someone spots something unusual amidst a swirling, cosmic backdrop. The observer's astonishment quickly morphs into shocked disbelief, the sight seemingly confirming their wildest suspicions. A human has appeared, impossibly, in this alien realm. A menacing figure, cloaked in shadow with glowing red eyes, descended from the darkness, the air around him vibrating with an unseen force. The imposing, bare-chested warrior with wild blonde hair and a determined scowl roared a challenge, his voice echoing with power as he beckoned his opponent closer. Based on the provided image, and having analyzed the Red Shirt manhwa, a powerful, blonde-haired warrior declared with unsettling intensity that he would await his unseen foe at the precipice of the abyss. A jolt of surprise shot through the bespectacled young man, his eyes widening at something unseen. He awoke with a gasp, heart pounding, in his bed, disoriented and catching his breath. Haunted by the same unsettling dream, the young man awoke in a cold sweat, his hand reaching out as if to grasp the fading remnants of the disturbing vision. Sora was jolted awake by a frantic voice warning him of their impending lateness, and he sleepily mumbled a confirmation as he struggled to rise. A chilling sense of déjà vu washed over her as she stared at a blurry reflection in a steamed-up bathroom mirror, convinced she recognized the man from a recent, unsettling dream connected to the abyss. The foggy mirror cleared slightly, revealing everyday toiletries, yet the unsettling premonition lingered. The thought of the abyss intensified the ominous feeling. Through the steamy shower door, the young man's startled expression shifted to confusion as he registered something unexpected. He muttered a bewildered, "Huh?" The young man, clad in a simple white shirt, brushed his teeth thoughtfully, his reflection staring back from the fogged mirror as he wondered aloud if perhaps his studies had consumed him a little too much lately. Startled by a questioning HM. From the towel-clad figure emerging from the shower, the dark-haired young man, dressed in sleepwear, choked mid-spit, a stream of water dribbling down his chin as he furiously wiped the condensation from the glass shower door. A muscular man, towel draped over his shoulder, playfully ruffled the hair of a dark-haired boy, teasing him about oversleeping. The boy, Sora, retorted with a touch of teenage defiance, insisting he wasn't a child anymore, and proudly pointed out his own burgeoning physique. Averting his gaze, he defensively grabbed a blue bottle from the shelf, insisting he wasn't looking. Exasperated, someone complained about the cramped living quarters leading to unwanted daily nudity. He fiddled with a small bottle, seemingly lost in thought as he listened to the complaint. He retorted sarcastically, promising a larger house only when their father became wealthy. Someone offered separate rooms to the dark-haired young man and Riku, a promise met with a weary, almost sarcastic, dripping with disbelief, reminder that this offer has been dangled for 5 long years. Water ran in the sink as someone mused aloud, relieved that life had become significantly easier since Riku joined the self-defense force. A thoughtful, almost somber, "Is that so?" Double quotes followed, hanging in the air. Brushing his teeth, a young man reflected on the passage of 3 years since his brother enlisted in the SDF. The dark-haired young man, casually dressed in a light shirt, rested a thoughtful hand on his chin, revealing his intention to join the SDF in the future. Contemplating a drastic change, the narrator reflected on their vibrant life, preparing to bid farewell to their jovial, if slightly unreliable, father, seen relaxed at the breakfast table with another figure looking on. His thoughts then drifted to his dad, a man of playful spirit, though not always dependable. A gentle smile softened the man's face as he leaned back, his hand resting behind his head, a fond memory clearly warming his thoughts of his strict but loving mother. The dark-haired man, marked with a distinctive forehead symbol, spoke with a sense of relief, finding solace in the presence of unseen eyes. Amidst a seemingly ordinary domestic scene, a young man in a white shirt reached for something on the table, while a woman with long dark hair watched. Elsewhere in the same space, another man in a dark robe sipped from a glass, a wistful expression playing on his face, silently yearning for the present moment to stretch into eternity. A sudden tremor startled the group gathered around a table, interrupting their quiet evening. Someone cried out in alarm, realizing the shaking earth signaled an earthquake. A foreboding sense of dread settled over the scene as an unseen narrator reflected that this tranquility was always destined to shatter. Overlooking a sprawling cityscape, a sense of finality descended as someone reflected on an unexpected end. A colossal, spiraling tower materialized amidst swirling chaos, casting an ominous shadow over the crumbling cityscape below. Staring in disbelief, the young man in the tan jacket pressed his hands against the glass, muttering in shocked disbelief. A heavy sense of foreboding settled as he realized the gravity of his current situation, clueless about the trials that lay ahead. He watched an Oz fighter jet soar past a colossal, newly appeared tower, pondering the monumental shift in human history it foreshadowed. Though much remained shrouded in mystery, the young man in the light jacket was certain of one thing: this imposing tower held the key to the answers he sought. He realized with dawning comprehension that this tower was crucial to his quest. The young man, his dark hair falling across his forehead, stared wide-eyed, a bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple as a chilling realization dawned on him. It was all connected to his dreams. Leaning back with folded arms, a man in a brown jacket reassured those at the table that following the SDF's orders was the quickest way home. A chilling realization dawned on the listeners as it was revealed these words had originally been spoken by the man's now absent brother. A faint "I promise," double quotes drifted from the phone, accompanied by a peace sign from the man on the screen, his voice strained and weak. Gripped by despair, a young man clutches his head, the weight of a terrible night pressing down on him as his parents, equally distraught, sit beside him. A dropped phone with a picture of a smiling face lying on the table, a chilling reminder of the brother he lost contact with that very night. A family watched a grim news report about a disaster, the news anchor assuring viewers that safety lay in staying home. A news reporter, face etched with alarm, announced the staggering appearance of 20 towers across the globe. The sudden emergence of these ominous structures sent shockwaves through the world. Then, abruptly, all news broadcasts ceased, deepening the unsettling mystery. Static buzzed across the television screen, a visual echo of the repetitive message now droning from the radio, adding to the growing sense of unease. As the urgent command to evacuate to a shelter blared, a man and a boy, possibly father and son, looked down at the chaotic street below, where people scrambled with their belongings toward safety. An official order confirmed the looming danger, sending a chill down their spines. As the man in the brown jacket discreetly gathered his belongings, seemingly preparing to leave, the dark-haired woman, absorbed in her task, continued writing diligently at her desk, oblivious to his actions. A weighty letter from their mother pressed upon the narrator's mind as they and their siblings hurried towards the evacuation shelter, their backpacks heavy with the unspoken fear of what lay ahead. A disturbing realization dawned upon the dark-haired young man, his eyes widening with a mixture of fear and understanding as he reflected on the ominous clues scattered along their path. Everything they had witnessed seemed to be pointing towards a hidden, unsettling truth. A young man with dark hair and a backpack watched a military vehicle drive past, the soldier inside seemingly acknowledging him with a glance. Soldiers drove through the city in their vehicles, their faces etched with despair. A young man in the back seat watched them go by, a flicker of concern in his eyes, while the soldier in the front seat, wearing camouflage, stared ahead with grim determination. The young man with the backpack turned away from the ravaged vehicles, their metal scarred with deep, unsettling claw marks. A group, seemingly weary travelers burdened with packs, emerged into a desolate cityscape, their faces grim as the overpowering stench of decay permeated the air. Amidst a city backdrop, a man with dark hair and a concerned expression questioned the state of the world, his gaze fixed on a younger man beside him who seemed equally bewildered. The gymnasium, serving as a temporary evacuation shelter, offered a bleak refuge, its entrance marked by a stark sign. The shelter within, overflowing with refugees, buzzed with a tense, hushed anticipation. A heavy silence blanketed the dimly lit room, where figures huddled amongst backpacks and makeshift shelters. A palpable sense of dread filled the air as the young man with the backpack and the older man, arms crossed tightly, seemed resigned to an impending doom. Sora was called over urgently, his quick agreement barely audible amongst the shuffling feet and heavy packs of the group. Even in the hushed atmosphere, a palpable tension lingered. Trouble brewed in the sterile, gray room as a dark-haired man moved with an unsettling smirk, his actions observed by another from a low vantage point, while a third figure sat isolated and seemingly oblivious to the escalating tension. In a sterile, dimly lit room, a man and a young boy sat, the child quietly clutching a packaged snack, their combined aura radiating a palpable sense of urgency, determined to make their presence felt. A man, enraged, caught a smaller figure red-handed, a loaf of bread clutched in their grasp, accusing the apparent thief of stealing his food. The dark-haired boy, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance, vehemently denied stealing something, his voice rising in panicked protest. The man in the suit looked shocked, his face contorted in disbelief as he was accused of already consuming his allotted single piece of something. With a raw, guttural cry, the young man in the tattered dark shirt lunged forward, his face a mask of fierce determination. A shocking blow landed, witnessed by stunned onlookers, one of whom desperately pleaded for intervention. A tall man offered a small, hopeful gesture of food to a child in the bleak, crowded space. A silent observer, marked by a distinctive hairstyle and small X-shaped earring, watched the scene unfold with a heavy, pregnant pause. The dark-haired man, a loaf of bread casually held in one hand, let out a mocking laugh, dangling the limp arm of another man in his grasp. With a predatory grin, the larger man loomed over the smaller, asking if he could have the bread, his eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. Terrified, the smaller man stammered a shaky affirmation. With a manic grin, the man declared the other's bread his own until the present predicament concluded, seizing the loaf in a triumphant gesture. A comforting hand rested on the distressed boy's shoulder, offering empty reassurances that it would be over soon and he wouldn't die, yet tears streamed down his face as he sobbed in anguish. Tension crackled in the air as one man, his face hardened with concern, snapped at another, questioning his actions in light of their precarious situation. With a chilling smirk and eyes burning with an unsettling intensity, the dark-haired man dismissed the crying boy's concern with a darkly humorous suggestion to worry about himself. A man, his face contorted with fury, roared a demand for a child's bread to be returned. With a crazed grin and eyes blazing with intensity, the dark-haired man roared, "Shut the fuck up," his fist clenched tight. With a grimace of determination, the man in the burgundy jacket delivered a brutal kick to his opponent's back, sending him sprawling and a cloud of dust swirling around the impact. Battered and bruised, the dark-haired young man crashed to the ground, a guttural cry escaping his lips as dust and debris swirled around him. A man in a suit offered a packaged bread roll to a young boy, who gratefully accepted it with a stammered thanks. Watching this seemingly charitable act, another, cloaked in shadow, seethed with silent fury, cursing the suited man under his breath. The dark-haired man's eyes narrowed, a silent tension radiating from his gaze. Darkness consumed the space, a moment of pregnant silence broken only by a sharp click of the tongue. Another man appeared, his face contorted in a grimace of frustration as he bit back a curse. With a simmering resentment, the man in the dark shirt vowed to remember this slight, spitting on the floor as he turned away from the others seated on mats. A younger boy, peering out from behind a larger figure, observed the scene with wide-eyed apprehension. A young man, his face etched with a mixture of shock and apprehension, uttered a hesitant "dad-da," double quotes, as he and a woman, presumably his mother, watched a man's intense reaction to some unseen event. With a serious expression and an intense gaze, the man reassured someone, promising to keep a close watch on another figure in the background. Haunted by a grim determination, the dark-haired man vowed to remember his adversary, even in the face of death. Eiji Kagawa, a young man with dark hair and a steady gaze, sat amidst a tense atmosphere, his expression a mixture of seriousness and quiet contemplation. Based on the knowledge of the red shirt manhwa, the scene likely depicts a tense confrontation where someone, possibly the protagonist, has cornered an antagonist, a man in a light-colored jacket and tie. A cruel smirk twisting his features as he's surrounded by shadowy figures, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken threats, and a chilling caption brands the man as scum who took pleasure, hinting at past atrocities. A cruel smirk twisted the bully's face as he loomed over his victim, the implication of violence heavy in the air. A grim-faced man in a tan jacket and tie strode forward, his followers trailing behind, two of them slumping against the wall, exhausted or injured. Darkness consumed the space around them, and a chilling caption materialized. "This is an emergency message." A figure in dark attire moved swiftly through a sterile, gray corridor, the sharp sound of their boots echoing. A voice, amplified and urgent, boomed through the shelter, ordering everyone to evacuate immediately through the back and board the waiting trucks. A soldier, his face etched with alarm, relayed the evacuation order, his voice strained with the pressure of the impending danger. The sharply dressed man, adjusting his sunglasses with a single finger, demanded an explanation from the group standing before him, a simmering tension in the air. The soldier, face tight with a strained apology, insisted he couldn't divulge the classified information. The bespectacled man leaned in, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, demanding an explanation that he seemed to doubt he would receive. Trapped in their homes for the agonizing days, the displaced people found themselves herded into a bleak, makeshift shelter, their fear and frustration growing as a suited official, his face contorted in a silent scream of his own helplessness, seemed to offer no answers or reassurance. With a furious cry of "What are we even paying taxes for?" the soldier in camouflage found himself swiftly countered by a sharp kick from the sharply dressed man, sending him sprawling. Amidst a flurry of motion, a soldier in camouflage, eyes wide with alarm, shouted a warning as a sharply dressed man in a suit and tie, his expression grim, led a diverse group of people through a darkened tunnel. Panic seized the soldier as a voice urged him to run. A mysterious they were close. He spun around, a question etched on his face. A young man, his face etched with urgency, pulled at his father, urging him and his mother to hurry, his voice laced with a desperate plea. His father, caught off guard, let out a startled "huh?" The son, eyes wide with an unknown fear, began to reveal something crucial, starting with "I dot dot dot." A sense of foreboding washed over the young man as he followed the suited figure and the woman with long dark hair, his wide eyes reflecting the growing unease. As the soldier fell, a sharp command echoed through the corridor, urging the suited men to escape to the vehicles before it was too late. A fierce battle scene, ripped from a comic or game, burst into reality, startling onlookers in suits. They recoil in shock and awe as the fantastical figures seemed to leap from the page, the sound effects practically echoing around them. A monstrous figure, with wild white hair and blazing red eyes, roared in fury, sending a shockwave of power outward. Darkness swallowed the scene, leaving only a whispered question hanging in the air. What in the world dot dot dot? Overwhelmed with shock and disbelief, the young man's eyes widened, reflecting the horror of the unfolding events as he grappled with the question of what was happening. Terror gripped the fleeing group as a monstrous figure, wielding a shield and radiating an eerie glow, descended upon them. The dark-haired young man in the foreground, face contorted in fear, desperately cried for help, the words barely escaping his lips as he stumbled forward. The others, a mix of students and professionals, panicked and scattered, their faces reflecting the sheer horror of the unfolding chaos. Sora, urged by desperate cries, sprinted through a shadowy corridor, leaving a bewildered comrade in his wake. Amidst a chaotic scene filled with panic screams and rushing figures, a silver-haired man sprinted through the crowded streets, pursued by an unknown threat. A wave of people surged around him, some fleeing in terror, others frozen in shock as the ground trembled beneath their feet. Looming above, a colossal figure cast a long shadow, its sheer size hinting at impending destruction. With wide, frantic eyes, the young man urgently shouted for two others to board first, the space clearly too small for everyone. As the tense crowd pressed forward, a lone figure in a light jacket reached out desperately, seemingly falling or being pushed away from the group above him. With a desperate cry of Sora, the young man lunged forward, his hand grasping another's in a fierce handshake amidst a flurry of motion. A tense confrontation erupted as a crowded truck bed became the center of a heated dispute. The man in the foreground, seemingly unfazed by the angry shouts of those around him, was ordered to leave if he wasn't going to contribute. With gritted teeth and a fierce glare, the dark-haired young man cursed at his predicament. Sora, seemingly in pursuit, cried out a name as a determined young man in a light jacket sprinted away, declaring his intent to find another escape route. Frustration rippled through the air as the group realized another vehicle was already at capacity. With a determined mutter, the hooded figure in tan chased after the moving truck, another figure already scrambling up its back. With a determined grit, the young man in the maroon jacket lunged for the back of the speeding truck, his fingers scrabbling for purchase. He declared it the last one, indicating a final, desperate attempt. Having analyzed the red shirt Manhwa, the scene depicts a desperate escape. The young man in the beige hoodie, clinging precariously to the edge of a moving vehicle, struggles to hold on as the others rush forward, intent on pulling him down. Darkness engulfs the scene for a heartbeat, then a hand, reaching out, hints at an unexpected intervention. With a bright, grateful grin, the dark-haired young man grasped the offered hand, a heartfelt thank you, echoing in the air. A chilling chuckle escaped his lips, a sinister amusement playing in his eyes. Thanks, he echoed, a predatory gleam in his gaze, the words dripping with irony. Overwhelmed by a surge of raw power, the young man's eyes widened, blazing with a fierce intensity as he bared his teeth in a primal snarl. Eiji Kagawa, with a sinister grin, declared his dominance, his words echoing a familiar phrase. Another person, whose hand he gripped tightly, looked up at him in stunned disbelief, questioning fate and the unfortunate circumstance of facing this particular adversary. As cruel words rained down, the young man plummeted from the vehicle, his outstretched hands grasping for a hold that wasn't there. He braced for the inevitable impact, the chilling thought it's over double quotes echoing in his mind. The young man in the light shirt fell back as a wave of dark-clad figures surged forward. He braced himself, feet slamming against the ground as he desperately fought against the inevitable. Terror filled his eyes as he realized the gravity of his situation, his inner voice screaming, "I don't want to die yet." Knowing the context of red shirt, the young man in the tan jacket, likely beak sand, crumpled to the ground, just swirling around him as a heavy thud echoed the impact. A chilling premonition of someone double quotes hung in the air as the dark-haired figure collapsed, their body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. A desperate plea for help echoed as spectral, sandaled feet hovered above the ground, surrounded by a blur of running figures. A spectral, glowing figure materialized, addressed as kid by a darker presence, eliciting a confused huh from someone observing the bizarre scene, who then wondered aloud, filled with dawning realization about the figure's identity. A surge of recognition washed over someone as they realized the imposing, white-haired figure before them was the very man from their dream, radiating an otherworldly power. A chilling promise echoed, "I'll be waiting for you, double quotes as a swirling vortex of darkness opened, revealing the terrifying depths of the abyss. Disoriented and trembling, the dark-haired young man in the beige jacket clutched himself, his wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and bewilderment as he wondered if the horrifying experience he just endured was merely a dream. The dark-haired young man awoke in a strange place, disoriented and clutching at his shirt. He wondered aloud, his voice full of panic, about his whereabouts. A massive, crudely shaped hammer suddenly hurtled towards him, filling his vision. Based on the provided panels and assuming knowledge of the *red shirt *manhwa, here's a possible continuation. The young man, usually underestimated due to his seemingly simple attire, reacted with astonishing speed, a startled gasp escaping his lips as he dodged a blow. A grotesque, green-skinned creature, its fangs bared in a feral snarl, lunged into the space the protagonist had just occupied. A young man, sprawled on the ground, stared in terror at a monstrous green creature looming over him, his mind screaming, "A monster!" Fear gripping his heart, he frantically searched for his parents, his voice a choked whisper, "Where are Mom and Dad? Why am I alone here?" Amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, a hooded figure stumbled back, their weapon flung away, a monstrous, green-skinned creature looming over them. The figure, disoriented and terrified, wondered if they had already succumbed to death and descended into hell. A sharp cry of pain escaped the young man's lips as a gash appeared on his face, his eyes wide with shock and fear. The ground rushed up to meet him as he was thrown back by the force of the blow. Landing hard, he cursed the monstrous being that had attacked him. Exhausted and frustrated, the man demanded to know why the relentless green creature wouldn't leave him alone. The creature, a goblin with a wicked grin, lunged forward, axe raised. Cursing under his breath, the man braced himself for the inevitable impact. A monstrous, green-skinned creature, its tongue lolling between sharp teeth, charged forward with ferocious intent. Panic seized the young man as he fled through the ravaged streets, a monstrous figure hot on his heels. A colossal tower, seemingly born from thin air, dominated the ruined cityscape, filling him with a chilling awe. His thoughts raced back to the betrayal that had landed him in this chaotic nightmare. A dark grin spread across the young man's face as his eyes glowed with an unsettling light, his thoughts consumed by a mysterious old man. The image of the old man materialized, his features shrouded in an ethereal glow, his single visible eye radiating an intense power. A monstrous goblin, wielding a crude stone axe, lunged downwards, its glowing red eyes fixated on its prey. The young man below, face contorted in a grimace of determination, braced himself for the impact, muttering in this monster double quotes as he prepared to fight back. "Bastards," he seethed, a dangerous glint igniting in his lavender eye. With a feral scream of "Die, all of you." The young man in the beige hooded jacket lunged downwards, his attack aimed at the monstrous, reptilian eye below. Amidst the crumbling ruins of a grand structure, under a dust-filled sky, a lone figure in a reddish-brown coat knelt, the grim realization of his survival sinking in as he looked down at the lifeless body of a monstrous green creature. Leaning closer, the observer noted the slain creature's eerie resemblance to a video game character. A curious mark on its chest sparked a question. Could it be a rank, a chilling reminder of a gamified reality? Amidst the relentless downpour and the crumbling ruins of a city, the young man in the brown jacket stumbled, a startled gasp escaping his lips as a grotesque, clawed hand reached out from below, grabbing at his leg. A dark, sharp crystal plunged into the ground, scattering dust and debris as a hooded figure loomed above, their presence ominous and undefined. A young man, his face streaked with blood and eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning recognition, stared at something unseen. He realized something significant, his breath catching in his throat. A gruesome scene unfolded as a slain goblin, pierced through the chest, lay sprawled on the cracked earth, his mouth agape in a silent scream, while a shadowy figure loomed over him, uttering a stunned "what the double quotes under their breath. Amidst the debris of a ruined city, the young man in the tan jacket watched in stunned silence as a dark, crystalline shard materialized before him, hovering ominously in the air. The young man, clad in a tattered light jacket, lunged forward, his face contorted in a grimace as streaks of white energy crackled around him. A sudden realization struck him, his eyes widening in disbelief as he sensed a foreign presence within himself. Electric sparks now danced around his face, mirroring the unsettling energy coursing through his veins. Amidst a hazy, smoke-filled backdrop, the young man, his face still bearing the marks of recent battle, touched his neck in stunned disbelief as he realized his wounds were gone. A sudden, dawning realization struck him this was only the beginning. Gripped by a surge of power, the young man clenched his fist, a flicker of awe and determination in his eyes as he realized he felt stronger. Standing over a slain reptilian creature, the protagonist gripped their crude spear, wondering if defeating enemies in this harsh reality granted experience points like in a game. Wary and alert, the young man in the light jacket eyed the fallen creature on the desolate island, realizing there could be more lurking nearby. He gripped his makeshift weapon tighter, deciding to scout the area cautiously to avoid any surprise attacks. Amidst the desolate ruins, a lone figure completed a full circuit, his brow furrowed in weary determination, a hint of uncertainty clouding his gaze as he took in the devastated surroundings. He seemed to be pondering his next move. Alone amidst the desolate ruins, the young man realized with a chilling certainty that there were no monsters, and this was the only path he could take. Trapped and desperate, he wondered if this perilous leap from the crumbling skybound ruins was his only escape. With a grunt of effort, the young man swung his hammer, chipping away at the rock face as a set of floating stairs materialized before him. The scene opens with a dramatic view of a crumbling, stone stairway against a smoky sky, a figure shadowed back suggesting impending danger near Smokeski Island. The young man with dark hair, clad in a light hoodie, looked up with a grim expression, a sense of foreboding tightening his features as he muttered, "This looks bad." The lone figure carefully navigated a precarious path of jutting stone ledges, pickaxe in hand, the wind whipping around him. A sudden realization struck him. This treacherous terrain was prime monster territory, just like in the games. Based on the red shirt Manhwa, the protagonist, recognizable by his determined expression and dark hair, grimly reflected on the ease of video game respawns, contrasting it with the perilous reality he faced. Gripping a makeshift weapon, the young man in the tan jacket declared his refusal to test the reality of his situation, even as he carefully navigated a treacherous path across precarious pillars. Gasping for breath, the dark-haired figure triumphantly reached the top, only to realize with dawning horror that the precarious stairway ended abruptly in midair. Based on the Manhwa red shirt, the young man, recognizable by his distinctive beige jacket and dark hair, emerged cautiously from a shadowy archway, clutching a makeshift weapon. A beat of silence, a dark panel hinting at hidden dangers, and he reappeared, now pressed against a rough stone wall, his grip tightening on the improvised bludgeon, his expression taut with anticipation. A metallic contraption erupted in a fiery blast. A flickering torch illuminated a weathered, cracked tombstone within a somber chamber. A lone figure, clad in a light jacket and dark gloves, stood silently, his back to the viewer, seemingly startled by the scene before him. Leaning over a dark, weathered stone etched with unfamiliar characters, the young man in the light jacket realized, with a shiver of unease, that although he'd never encountered such symbols, their meaning somehow seeped into his mind. A cryptic inscription on an ancient, weathered surface declared that the fragments belonged to their bearers, and acquiring all of them granted the right to leave the abyss. Tracing the worn inscription with his fingers, a young man with dark hair, clad in light clothing, wondered aloud if this desolate place truly was the abyss he'd heard tales of. Driven by a grim determination, the dark-haired young man realized he needed to gather all the fragments. A sinister smile played on his lips as he pondered, was escape truly within his grasp? With a determined "all right then double quotes, the young man in the brown jacket and gray pants, clutching a plastic bag, descended the stone steps, a newfound resolve hardening his expression as he declared his complete motivation. Bracing himself against a cracked wall, the young man in the beige hoodie realized with a surge of renewed determination that the monster he faced wasn't as formidable as he initially thought. He vowed to escape the perilous situation he found himself in. Having analyzed the red shirt Manhwa, the scene depicts a desperate struggle. The protagonist, clad in a light jacket and dark pants, throws himself through a narrow, glowing crevice, as if escaping some unseen threat. A blinding flash of light filled the frame, followed by the chilling revelation. The first layer of the abyss, a mere 900 square meters, contained a monstrous being marked with the ominous numeral 1, carved into its very flesh. The slain green-skinned monster, laid out on the dusty ground, bore a gruesome wound in its chest and a chilling mark, the number 2 carved into its flesh, a grim detail in the vast, 1,800 square meters second layer. Gripping his axe tightly, the young man in the light jacket stood his ground against the 2 snarling wolf-like creatures. The chilling realization dawning on him that the 3rd level of this monstrous gauntlet spanned a vast 3,600 square meters, and one of the 4 beasts he faced bore the ominous mark of 3. With a guttural cry, the young man plunged his hand into the fallen monster, his face contorted in grim determination. It was revealed that fragments, hidden within numbered monsters, held the key to the next layer. These fragments were the only way to progress from level 3 to level 4. A grim realization dawned upon the hooded figure. The higher the number, the stronger the monsters become, escalating the danger he faced. He pushed forward, his coat billowing behind him as he navigated a dimly lit, narrow passage. A palpable tension hung in the air as something more concerning loomed. The scarred, dark-haired young man, his face etched with grim determination, stared into the middle distance, lost in thought. He realized with growing unease that the elusive keys were becoming increasingly difficult to obtain. Gazing upwards, he realized with a growing unease that the towering structure before him doubled in size with each ascent, and so did the monstrous hordes lurking within. Wounded and bloodied, the young man stumbled through the shadowy forest, his crude axe clutched in his hand as monstrous wolves closed in. He braced himself, a grim determination hardening his gaze, whispering, "But I. With a primal roar that shook the very air around him, the dark-haired man's power surged, his eyes blazing with newfound strength. He became stronger. With a surge of power, the figure in white plunged downwards, their attack radiating an ominous purple energy that cracked the very ground beneath them. High above a vast, misty landscape, a lone figure with long silver hair and a tattered shirt sat perched on a cliff edge, contemplating the layers of the world he had ascended. He observed that with each higher layer, the variety of monsters he encountered grew ever more diverse and numerous. On the 12th floor, the protagonist faced the monstrous creatures that had once threatened the shelter. Now, however, the tables had turned, and the monsters were no match for the protagonist's newfound strength. Wounded and bloodied, the dark-haired warrior stumbled, his discarded scimitar lying on the blood-soaked ground, a grotesque, pale-faced monster looming over him with a chilling, hungry grin. Another monster realized with a terrifying clarity just how many monsters now surrounded them. Overwhelmed by the monstrous figures towering above, the long-haired warrior felt their senses begin to fade. Notifications flashed across the screen, escalating the threat level for 1,096 monsters on the 13th layer. Then a surge to 16,384 on the 14th, before a terrifying jump to over 1,000,000 on the 21st, as monstrous figures loomed. A lone, muscular figure with flowing gray hair launched himself into the fray, bracing against the charging horn of a massive beast. Upon reaching the 30th floor, the lone warrior was met with the chilling realization that the monster horde had swelled to an unimaginable 500 million. A colossal, multi-eyed beast loomed over the warrior, a terrifying testament to the sheer scale of the challenge ahead. The search for the keys was proving to be an incredibly difficult task. A lone figure, long dark hair whipping behind them, battled the monstrous, horned beast amidst a swarm of smaller, winged creatures. It seemed that some of the key-holding monsters were heavily guarded, making the quest even more perilous. A horde of menacing, tusked creatures, their eyes burning with a fierce intensity, emerged from the shadows, some brandishing crude weapons while others sought refuge in nearby caves. The lone figure with long white hair stood defiantly before a monstrous, multi-legged creature, a palpable tension hanging in the air. A sense of impending revelation permeated the scene as the narrator began to unveil the most annoying thing. With a feral roar, the long-haired warrior slammed his hand into the shattered earth, sending a shockwave of power rippling through the debris-strewn landscape. A fierce warrior mused on the sheer time it took to vanquish every last one of his foes. With a savage roar, the massive, gray-haired brute crashed down, sending debris flying as a smaller, white-haired figure barely dodged the devastating blow. Yet, despite the apparent victory, a sense of unease lingered, foreshadowing a looming challenge, no matter the cost. A monstrous figure, its face a grotesque mask of bone and flesh, recoiled in agony as a crimson spray erupted from its gaping maw. A monstrous figure, marked with a skull and the Roman numeral 12, lay defeated, its body riddled with wounds and emitting a smoky haze. Another, similar creature, equally grotesque and broken, lay nearby, suggesting a fierce battle had just concluded. Despite the carnage, a grim determination echoed in the air. I kept moving forward. With a determined stride, the purple-haired warrior pushed open the massive doors, stepping into the ominous 42nd layer of the abyss. A lone figure stood upon a crumbling precipice, a dark silhouette against the fiery sunset as a horde of monstrous creatures surged beneath him, their numbers overwhelming. A chilling chuckle escaped the figure's lips as he looked down upon the chaos he seemingly commanded. Menacing roars echoed across the battlefield as hulking, monstrous figures charged forward, a swarm of dragons swirling ominously above them. A chilling wave of terror washed over the land as the creature's laughter vibrated through the air. The silver-haired warrior, muscles bulging and etched with glowing lines, roared with exhilaration, proclaiming this was the real deal. A monstrous skeletal figure, seemingly the remains of a colossal dragon, crumbled within the ruins of a once grand structure, as several winged figures soared through the smoke-filled sky overhead. Amidst a crumbling, desolate backdrop, a figure with stark white hair grimaced, his body bearing the marks of battle as he wrestled with the disorientation of lost time. He dismissed the question of the year with a chilling realization: the very concept of time held no meaning anymore. A towering structure, etched with countless markings, crumbled and groaned under an unseen force, dust and debris swirling around its base where skeletal remains lay scattered. Amidst the grim backdrop of death and massacre, the silver-haired warrior traced the chilling tally marks etched onto the weathered wall, a stark testament to the carnage that had unfolded, his gaze falling upon the skeletal remains scattered at his feet. The white-haired warrior observed the scene with a heavy gaze. A monstrous Volf lunged, its red eyes blazing, only to be met by a gleaming axe held aloft amidst scattered bones and a lone, seated figure. Death hung heavy in the air as the monsters met their end. Dust swirled around the fallen figure, a lone bone lying near his outstretched hand amidst the rubble of a devastated landscape. A monstrous, boar-like creature brought down a massive axe, its shadow falling upon the scarred, silver-haired warrior crouched beneath. The warrior braced himself, emanating a grim determination as he declared his intent to massacre. A chilling swoosh echoed through the air, punctuated by the splattering of something dark and viscous. A monstrous, spiky beast roared in agony as a powerful force slammed into its flesh, sending debris flying and the ground trembling. The silver-haired warrior, amidst the swirling chaos, unleashed a devastating blow that cracked the very air around him. With a fierce cry echoing through the air, the silver-haired warrior, muscles taut and eyes blazing with an eerie violet light, unleashed a devastating blow, shattering the ground beneath his opponent's feet. With a grim determination, the white-haired warrior, his body a canvas of blood and battle scars, delivered a final, crushing blow to the monstrous creature beneath him. The silver-haired warrior, bloodied and weary, grimly tallied the monstrous foes he had vanquished, his breath catching in his throat. The scarred, silver-haired warrior decided to cut it up first, stepping over the monstrous Volf's severed head in the ravaged landscape. A sense of anticipation hung in the air as someone mused, "Isn't it about time?" While a single finger traced a line against a scratched surface. Amidst a backdrop of ancient, scarred stone, a figure with long, pale hair, seemingly exhausted, clung to the wall, a breathless question escaping his lips. "I found the key." A looming, monstrous form, edged with sharp protrusions, loomed just behind him. Debris rained down around the silver-haired warrior as a powerful force shook the very ground he stood on. He looked towards the source of the tremor, a flicker of alarm in his eyes. Amidst the crumbling ruins of what once might have been a grand temple, a lone figure with long, dark hair stood defiant against a colossal insect-like monster descending from the dust-filled sky. A monstrous, insect-like creature descended upon the ravaged landscape, its glowing eyes fixed on the lone, silver-haired figure standing defiantly amidst the debris, who simply remarked on the dramatic entrance. With an intense stare, the silver-haired man was questioned, "Are you the key?" As an aura of power emanated from him. Perched precariously on the edge of a shattered cliff, the lone figure with silver hair braced themselves against the wind. With a thunderous roar, a powerful attack slammed into the earth, sending debris flying and a shockwave rippling outwards. The silver-haired figure unleashed a breathtaking counterattack, a surge of pale energy erupting from their weapon, tearing through the dust in devastation. A powerful figure, enveloped in swirling energy, declared that strength was irrelevant in this confrontation. He unleashed a devastating blow, his opponent's face contorted in a grimace of pain and shock as the impact reverberated. The outcome, he stated coldly, would always be the same. With a surge of power, the masked figure unleashed a devastating blow, sending debris flying and the air crackling with raw energy. Even the most formidable monsters, confident in their strength, would tremble before this display of power. Amidst a crumbling, dusty landscape, a figure with stark white hair stood defiantly beneath the monstrous, hovering creature, the air thick with a palpable sense of impending doom. A single blow could be fatal. A pained whisper, "No dot to dot," escaped the scarred lips of the white-haired figure, his glowing eye reflecting a profound loss as he declared that all power held no meaning for him anymore. Dust and debris rained down as someone's bare feet scrambled for purchase on the crumbling stone. Darkness enveloped the scene, then a scarred fist clenched, a desperate whisper escaping its owner. "Where?" Based on the context of the *red shirt Manhwa, the white-haired warrior, likely Bikru, roared a challenge, demanding his hidden opponent reveal themselves, convinced he held the key to the forged second layer. As the countless winged creatures swarmed through the debris-filled sky, a voice boomed, filled with a potent mix of frustration and resolve. "I had enough." In 20 enigmatic towers abruptly materialized across the globe, baffling humanity with their sudden appearance. Under a stormy, ethereal sky, a group of individuals, clad in muted greens and browns, marched towards a looming, gothic structure, the air heavy with the grim reminder that monsters had nearly eradicated humanity. A chaotic scene unfolded as grotesque, fanged creatures descended upon a grand, but now crumbling, structure, their roars echoing amidst the carnage. Most of the population had been slaughtered. Judgment Day descended upon the world in a maelstrom of violence and chaos. Amid the carnage, a monstrous figure with glowing eyes lunged forward, scattering terrified survivors. From the remnants of this devastation, a select few, touched by some unknown force, awakened to a cryptic system, hinting at a new and uncertain future. A monstrous creature roared, its gaping maw revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth as a man stood defiantly below, a notification appearing before him announcing his awakening and the initialization of his combat stats. Those who awakened were bestowed with immense power. Humanity, reshaped by this newfound strength, saw the awakened established hunter guilds, their figures radiating an aura of potent energy. A monstrous, one-eyed wolf-like creature lunged with bared fangs at the long silver-haired warrior, who braced himself amidst the skeletal remains of a fallen beast. Based on the context of *red shirt*, the silver-haired warrior, scarred and determined, charged forward, spurred by a demanding voice that wanted to see his stats. He pushed himself harder, a confused grunt escaping his lips as he sensed something amiss. A shadowy figure, their legs and feet bare, strides forward, a black, chained canine creature bounding ahead. Alarm flares as someone shouts that an advanced transfer scroll has been used. A desperate plea rings out to stop the summon from completing. The scarred, silver-haired man paused, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, questioning if the sound he'd just heard was a human voice. As a blinding light erupted, seemingly tearing a rift in the very fabric of reality, the silver-haired warrior found himself staring at a swirling vortex of energy, a frightened beast cowering nearby. A surge of desperate hope coursed through him as he wondered if this might be his escape. Amidst the chaos and destruction, the silver-haired warrior, his face marred by battle scars, spotted a glimmer of hope, an exit. The scarred, white-haired warrior clambered over the rubble, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes as he realized there might be a way out. A figure was enveloped in a blinding, crackling sphere of energy, seemingly caught in the throes of a powerful summoning ritual. A system warning abruptly appeared, flashing a dire message: the abyssal summoning could only transport to living beings. Amid swirling warnings about abyssal summoning and its limitations, a figure with long, silver hair launched himself into action, his powerful body taut with purpose. Clenching his jaw, a fierce glint in his crimson eye, the white-haired man declared he wouldn't let anyone interfere, the unspoken threat hanging heavy in the air. A surge of power crackled around the silver-haired warrior, his single visible eye blazing with a fierce, ominous light, a warning flickering across his augmented vision as he growled a challenge to anyone who dared to obstruct him. Meanwhile, just outside a city on Earth, a pale figure with long white hair strained against glowing chains. Seemingly in the midst of a powerful, otherworldly summoning ritual, warnings flashing around them about the limitations of transferring living beings. A chilling wind swept through a desolate graveyard, bats swirling around a decaying church against a twilight sky. The pink-haired warrior gasped, a spectral blade materializing beside her face, her expression a mixture of shock and grim determination. Darkness enveloped the scene, tension hanging heavy in the air. A heeled boot, presumably hers, landed forcefully amidst the tall grass, kicking up dust and debris. Isonozaki, a level 19 warrior with vibrant pink hair, desperately raced through a shadowy landscape, determined to escape unseen pursuers. Her boots pounded the ground, each step a desperate plea for freedom as she pushed herself harder. Her momentum carried her forward, the wind whipping at her clothes as she fled into the gloom. With a chilling scream echoing through the desolate landscape, the pink-haired figure plummeted from the skeletal branches of a towering, dead tree. Gasping for air, the pink-haired girl collapsed, her tears mingling with the dirt, a chilling premonition gripping her. This was bad. A pale hand entwined with thorny vines reached out in the shadowy gloom, a muttered curse of what a pain escaping the unseen speaker's lips. A hulking figure, brandishing a large weapon, demanded an advanced transfer scroll from someone out of view. Aka, a level 30 for druid, stood ready, radiating a protective aura. The brute scoffed, dismissing a hidden figure as a low-level rookie incapable of handling the powerful scroll. The rookie, seemingly injured or defeated, lay slumped in the shadows, silenced and vulnerable. The grizzled swordsman, Choji Shido, loomed, his ultimatum hanging heavy in the air: surrender, or face his merciless wrath. A desperate plea rose from nearby, begging for a woman's life. The pink-haired individual was abruptly interrupted, their wide-eyed expression reflecting shock and fear as they were accused of breaking the rules by engaging in forbidden hunter-on-hunter combat. Shohei Toshida, a level 38 barbarian, inquired about the rules with a predatory glint in his eye, a sinister grin playing on his lips. A hulking figure, muscles rippling, loomed over the terrified pink-haired individual, declaring his dominance over the situation. The imposing warrior, his red bandana a stark contrast to his shadowed face and glowing eyes, held a wickedly shaped blade, offering a chilling ultimatum: surrender the scroll, or lose your limbs. With a chilling warning, the pink-haired warrior, back turned and a blade gripped tight, dared her pursuers to advance any further. Alarm flashed across the dark-haired woman's face as she realized the gravity of the situation, urging the bandana-clad man beside her to stop an impending force summon. Having analyzed the manhwa red shirt, this particular scene depicts a tense confrontation. The bandana-clad man's eye flared with dangerous light as he spat a venomous insult at his unseen opponent. With a furious roar and a surge of dark energy, the masked figure lunged, demanding the scroll from his opponent. The pink-haired warrior, racing against the onslaught, met the attack with a fierce determination in her eyes, ready to protect the scroll with her life. A gleaming blade pierced the air, scattering shimmering particles. Darkness engulfed the scene. Then a man with a red bandana stared in disbelief at a glowing circle, realizing it was a teleportation portal. A force summoning ripped through the air, electrifying the atmosphere. Panic flared in the faces of the onlookers as one with blonde hair and a red cap realized the grave danger. Terror twisted the features of another with dark purple hair, their words a choked whisper of impending doom as an uncontrollable, powerful monster was unleashed. Consumed by a furious power, the pink-haired warrior unleashed a devastating attack, her eyes blazing with destructive intent as she roared, "Die!" A vortex of electric blue energy crackled, bolts of lightning striking down from a swirling, otherworldly maelstrom. Amid the chaotic storm of energy, a figure, bathed in its ethereal glow, seemed to command the very lightning, while other figures recoiled and braced against the unleashed power. Onlookers watched, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear, as the electrifying spectacle unfolded before them. As an overwhelming energy pressed down, the scarred, headband-wearing man grimly observed the situation, a sense of foreboding washing over him and his dark-haired companion, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. A crackling bolt of blue energy ripped through the darkened sky, chain lightning striking downwards with immense power. A hush fell over the scene as the light faded, revealing the colossal figure that had emerged, its form obscured by smoke and residual energy. With a gasp of awe, a warrior below exclaimed its long-awaited arrival. A formidable Cerberus, crackling with power, materialized, its level 3 status declared. Scoffing, a man mocked the creature's efforts, clearly unimpressed by its display. With condescending amusement, he tossed a bone towards the Cerberus, a gesture dripping with disdain. Looming over the pink-haired warrior, a monstrous figure sneered, its words dripping with mockery about the anticipated summoning. A whispered "Why?" escaped the warrior's lips, a mix of confusion and defiance in her gaze. The monster's presence scoffed, revealing the seemingly insignificant scroll the warrior had risked everything to protect, dismissing her sacrifice as a pathetic joke. A monstrous figure loomed, its hand reaching out menacingly as a pink-haired girl looked on in startled confusion. With a swift, brutal strike, the dark-haired warrior cleaved through a beast, sending it hurtling past the stunned girl. Shock and disbelief washed over someone as they witnessed the aftermath of the sudden violence. A group of adventurers recoiled in horror, their eyes wide with fear as they confronted a humanoid monster. Amidst swirling smoke and shadows, the pink-haired warrior gasped in stunned recognition, her eyes wide with disbelief as she seemed to recognize the looming figure before her. The white-haired warrior, battered but unbroken, emerged from the swirling smoke, his glowing eyes fixed on an unseen threat, a grim whisper escaping his lips. "I made it out." The long-haired figure, scarred and wild-eyed, burst from the dark depths, a triumphant roar escaping his lips as he savored his hard-won freedom. Amidst a chaotic flurry of motion, a triumphant laugh echoed as bodies tumbled through the smoky air. A chilling laughter echoed, paralyzing the red-banded warrior with fear as he recoiled, while another, dark-haired figure braced against an unseen force. Amidst the chaos and dust, a figure with dark, windswept hair emerged, eyes wide with alarm and suspicion, demanding to know the identity of a newcomer. In a graveyard shrouded in mist, a dark-haired figure, adorned with gold arm guards, paused, a question mark hanging heavy in the air as they regarded a formidable, bare-chested warrior with long, silver hair. The white-haired warrior, shrouded in a haze of dust and power, began to transform, drawing a gasp of shock from the dark-haired woman who reached out towards him as if to stop the inevitable. A sinister aura emanated from the long, silver-haired figure, their crimson eyes gleaming with a menacing intensity as dark energy swirled around them. The scarred, gray-haired figure, seemingly in a state of distress, gripped the dark-haired woman, questioning their location with frantic urgency. She confirmed his desperate query, assuring him they were indeed on Earth. The long-haired, scarred figure emerged from what seemed like an ethereal mist, exhaled a triumphant, "I've finally returned." The bandana-clad warrior, his face a mask of disbelief, aggressively questioned the strangely dressed duo, suspecting some sort of elaborate cosplay. As debris flew through the air, a warrior with long, silver hair warned his opponents not to underestimate the Tiger's Roar Guild. A whirlwind of motion erupted as three figures clashed in a furious melee, their attacks leaving trails of light in the air. The one in green, a blur of focused energy, landed a powerful kick, sending debris scattering. Another combatant, wearing a red bandana, launched a counteroffensive, his strike a flash of white against the chaotic backdrop. A third, seemingly caught in the crossfire, braced himself against the onslaught, his body twisting to evade the incoming blows. The white-haired figure's gaze hardened, a violet light pulsing ominously within his eye. Amidst a snowy backdrop, a muscular, bandana-clad figure radiated power as he declared his opponent a monster. The accusation echoed in the next moment, hanging heavy in the frigid air. The accused, eyes blazing with a fierce intensity, seemed to embody the very label hurled at him, his power surging. A monstrous figure, radiating a chilling purple aura, emerged from the depths, his bulging muscles and fierce expression confirming someone's worst fears. A pain groan escaped the lips of a blonde-haired man, his face contorted in agony, as if an unseen force was crushing him. The imposing, bare-chested figure with wild blonde hair and a red cap roared, demanding to know his opponent's number, amidst crackling energy. Confused, the long-haired figure beneath him, barely visible, seemed to question the very nature of the demand. Overwhelmed, he let out a pained gasp as power surged around him. The silver-haired man gasped, a strange energy crackling around him. His hand, tipped with sharp claws, twitched, radiating a dark power. A fierce blow landed, drawing a pained gasp from the long-haired warrior. The impact sent him reeling back, a cloud of dust and debris swirling around his feet. He crumpled to the ground, his body hitting the stone with a sickening thud, a splash of something dark spreading beneath him. The silver-haired warrior stood amidst fallen comrades, frustration and anger bubbling beneath his breath as he cursed their fate. One of his men, recognizing the warrior as their leader, cried out in concern. With a chillingly calm demeanor, the silver-haired figure dismissed a group of tense adventurers with a curt "get lost." As to figures, a woman with vibrant pink hair and a man with long, flowing white hair stood amidst a dimly lit forest, seemingly observing something below. A chaotic scene unfolded beneath them. A man with a bandana and wild blonde hair, possibly falling or being thrown, looked up in wide-eyed fury and swore vengeance on those above. The air crackled with awe as an unseen observer noted the immense power and brutal scars marring the back of the silver-haired figure. The pink-haired individual stared in disbelief, sweat beading on their face, grappling with the chilling possibility that the figure before them was an abyssal monster conjured by the scroll. The pink-haired woman asked the scarred, white-haired man how long it had been since the towers appeared. He responded with a confused "huh." 5 years had passed, and the pink-haired woman's face was etched with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. The pink-haired girl, her eyes wide with disbelief, bombarded the towering, shadowy figure with a flurry of questions about their strange attire, a mysterious scroll, and the very reality of their location. The imposing figure, partially obscured by darkness and marked with scars, began a cryptic explanation, mentioning ominous towers that had recently appeared. A system manifested itself to humanity. The pink-haired character recounted the devastation wrought by the towers, revealing a third of the city had crumbled in the 5 years since their emergence. A heavy silence followed, thick with anticipation. Emerging from the abyss after 5 years, the protagonist wondered at how much the world had changed, his thoughts juxtaposed against a holographic image of a menacing, shadowy figure. He grimly recalled S-City's devastation during the 7th large-scale invasion, forcing his desperate escape. A wave of recognition, tinged with pain, washed over the scarred man as he realized S-City was his birthplace. The pink-haired individual urgently questioned the scarred, gray-haired figure about the state of S-City. The scarred figure responded grimly, revealing the city's complete destruction. The pink-haired girl, her expression a mix of awe and concern, reassured the silver-haired individual that strong warriors had been dispatched to deal with the monstrous threat. Lost and with a thin scar tracing down his face, the white-haired man urgently inquired about the route to S-City. With a flick of her wrist and a sharp command, the pink-haired warrior propelled a surge of energy forward, urging someone to press on. The pink-haired girl realized with a mix of surprise and concern that someone was going off on their own. Intrigued by the sudden appearance of a mysterious man, the lavender-haired woman hurried through the eerie, cross-marked graveyard, determined to share the news with her sister. Meanwhile, amidst a desolate cityscape, a small group trudged through the ruins, one supporting another, their grim expressions and muttered curse revealing a shared resentment against someone they deemed a bastard. A tense group including a woman in green, a cloaked figure, and two muscular men, one with a red bandana, braced themselves as something unseen hurtled towards them. A figure, cloaked in shadows and emanating a dark energy, crashed to the ground as a challenging voice from above demanded their identity. The cloaked figure, shrouded in darkness, emanated a menacing aura, his single glowing eye fixated on an unseen presence as he declared his ability to sense his asterisk mark upon them all. A cloaked figure, radiating menacing energy, loomed over a fallen individual, their voice a chilling whisper, demanding information with a 3-second ultimatum. As debris rained down around them, a small group raced through the ravaged city streets, their faces a mixture of grim determination and fear. The man in the red cap, his features contorted in disbelief, roared in frustration, demanding to know what fresh hell awaited them. A cloaked figure, radiating power, declared the end of their opponent's time with a chilling finality. The scene shifts to confirm the grim fate of Eika, Choji, and Shisei, each listed as deceased, their levels and classes a stark reminder of their lost potential. The sun glinted off the towering headquarters of the Tiger's Roar Guild, hinting at the power within. A grim report echoed through the room, confirming the disappearance of Master Toshida's group and the vital scroll, leaving the dark-haired woman with a troubled expression. The dark-haired woman in the sharp business suit tensed as someone scoffed, "What trash?" and swirled the wine in their glass dismissively. A sharply dressed man with light hair, possibly in a position of authority, expressed disbelief that his recommended team couldn't handle a single, low-level summoner. He then received a chilling report. All communication with the team had been abruptly and simultaneously lost. Rick Mukai, the Storm Priest, gravely observed his clasped hands, the weight of the news heavy in the air. They were all gone, obliterated in a single, devastating blow. The blond man, casually elegant in his vest and crisp white shirt, received a sharp command to uncover the culprit, his hands fiddling with a small, glittering object on the polished table as he eagerly agreed. A powerful figure commanded Sanazaki's capture and interrogation, met with immediate obedience from a subordinate. From a high vantage point, a figure with slick-back blonde hair, dressed in sharp business attire, issued a chilling threat of lethal retribution against anyone who dared to harm his men, his words hanging heavy in the sunset-tinged cityscape. A startled, blonde man in a crisp suit watched as a long-haired, bare-chested figure suddenly burst past him with surprising speed. The blonde man's senses sharpened, a potent metallic scent hitting him hard, blood, fresh and alarming, and he wondered who its source could be. Gazing at the ravaged cityscape, the blonde man noted a fallen zone in the distance. He grimly realized the scale of the invasion was far greater than initially anticipated, sensing the presence of powerful forces at work. After 5 years of ominous silence, the tower, shrouded in shadows and crackling with an unsettling energy, finally stirred, its inhabitants emerging as dark figures with glowing eyes, ready to unleash their power upon the world. The blond man, his back to the viewer, strode purposefully through a brightly lit space, ordering all search parties to fall back. A desperate cry declared an emergency, as a figure plummeted from a towering skyscraper. With incredible speed, a silver-haired man, his body a canvas of scars and raw power, streaked across the cityscape, a flock of bats swirling ominously around him. High above the fallen city, amidst crumbling buildings and circling bats, a lone figure with long, white hair sat perched on a rooftop, silently observing the desolate scene below. High above, perched on a rooftop, a scarred figure with long, pale hair and a hardened gaze muttered that after 5 years trapped in the abyss, the world had become a living hell. Within the abyss, a towering figure with long white hair looked down, a declaration of intent hanging in the air. A young man in a yellow jacket, startled, looked up as a grotesque, green-skinned creature lunged at him with a crudely fashioned axe. With a furious roar, the dark-haired man yanked the spiked weapon from his opponent's chest, blood spraying around him as he challenged anyone else who dared to underestimate him. As the hulking green monster roared, its spiked mace hurtled towards the silver-haired warrior, who, with a fierce determination in his glowing red eyes, charged forward, a heavy chain whipping through the air behind him. Amidst a desolate, skeletal landscape, a lone figure with long, white hair knelt, their senses numbed, clutching a gruesome, bloody object. Haunted by a near transformation into a monster, the white-haired figure confessed his brush with the beast within. Consumed by a primal hunger, he clutched a bloody organ, his crimson eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity. Driven by the unwavering thought of his family, the bloodied, white-haired warrior persevered. Beneath a sky teeming with dark, winged creatures, the long-haired warrior, now seemingly unafraid, raced forward, a grim determination etched on his face, as he muttered about the monsters he once feared. With a dismissive sneer, the unseen speaker declared the bat-like creature now nothing more than a meager snack, as it shrieked and flapped wildly, blood splattering from unseen wounds. Consumed by a fierce determination, the dark-haired figure surged forward, a silent prayer for his family's safety echoing in his heart. He whispered a desperate plea for their well-being as he plunged into the unknown. Once a vibrant hub, S City now stood as a desolate wasteland, a haunting reminder of its former glory. Buildings lay in ruins, shredded like paper after a devastating earthquake. The long-haired, muscular figure walked through the ravaged landscape, noting the eerie absence of any monster-related carnage. The silver-haired man, his body marked with scars, mused that the place had been deserted since the evacuation. He gripped something, his fingers flexing with a tense energy. The long-haired, bare-chested man stepped through the crumbling doorway, a quiet "I'm home" double quotes hanging in the dust-filled air, his stance hinting at a grim return. Having faced countless trials and tribulations, the long-haired figure, silhouetted against the blinding light of the doorway, finally emerged from the dilapidated building, their weary steps echoing in the desolate space. The long-haired figure stood amidst the decay of an abandoned room, acknowledging its emptiness yet drawn to the lingering echoes of happier times. He reflected that despite the ruin, the place held a wealth of cherished memories. The scarred, silver-haired man paused, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, as he noticed something on a nearby table. A scarred figure with long, white hair sat hunched in a dimly lit room, reading a letter addressed to Sora, a loved one presumed dead. The writer, seemingly Sora's parent, refused to accept the loss, clinging to hope. They had recreated Sora's old room, every object a poignant reminder of their absent presence. The words "we're sure you're going to come back" echoed in the air, a promise and a plea. Overwhelmed with emotion, the silver-haired warrior, his body scarred and glistening, tilted his head back, tears mixing with the rain, realizing the immense sacrifice made for his return. They had prepared for his return, laying out his favorite clothes in a range of sizes, ensuring a comfortable welcome whenever he decided to reappear. A hand reached for a drawer, revealing a rolled-up map to Shelter 6 nestled among photographs, a whispered plea echoing, a promise to find them once the map was read. A hand gently held a faded photograph of a happy family to smiling children bookended by their parents, a silent promise of "we'll be waiting," always hanging in the air. Love and longing filled the room as the photo was cherished, a whispered love, Mom and Dad, a poignant testament to their enduring presence. Tears streamed down the silver-haired man's face as he grappled with the surge of power. He pondered his newfound strength, a dangerous glint in his eye, as he gripped a gleaming blade, its reflection mirroring his hardened gaze. Amidst a swirling vortex of light, a determined voice echoed, pondering their strength to bring an end to the unfolding apocalypse. The silver-haired man, sharply dressed in a suit, stared at his reflection, a flicker of determination in his eyes as he mused about reclaiming lost time. The silver-haired man, a scar etched across his cheek, focused intently, his thoughts fixated on Shelter 6. Consulting his map, the man decided to head east towards Shelter 6. He paused, surveying the devastated road ahead, strewn with debris. The scarred, silver-haired young man smirked, deciding to forge his own path, confident it would be quicker. Leaping from a crumbling structure, a dark-clad figure plunged downwards, a flock of birds scattering in their wake. A monstrous, feathered creature, radiating an aura of crackling energy, swooped down from the sky, its eyes blazing with predatory intent. With a guttural cry and a blur of motion, the white-haired figure plunged downwards, hand outstretched towards the churning crimson abyss below. A barrage of white-hot energy blasts tore through the ravaged cityscape, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Startled by a sudden noise, one guard leaned forward, a question in his eyes, while his companion, casually sipping from a canteen, dismissed it as the ramblings of a bored and possibly intoxicated mind. Two figures, startled, watched a bright streak slash across the overcast sky. Leaning over a railing overlooking a desolate cityscape, one pointed excitedly, demanding to know what the phenomenon was, while another admitted they hadn't even seen it. Amidst a desolate cityscape, a young man with a shoulder strap and a white shirt excitedly showed his phone to others, proclaiming he captured something incredible on camera. Amidst the crumbling cityscape, a figure with stark white hair hurtled through the air, a trail of crimson droplets marking his desperate flight, leaving onlookers below to wonder in disbelief if what they saw was actually human. Amidst a backdrop of towering skyscrapers and swarming birds, a desperate plea echoed. The pink-haired woman, her voice strained with fear, warned someone not to approach. A lone woman, seemingly desperate, pleaded for mercy in the desolate wasteland, claiming she was only searching for food. Two men, armed and armored, approached her, one commenting on her physique with a predatory tone. The other man noted her presence as a rare survivor in the wasteland, their words tinged with a dark implication as a third man joined them, remarking on how long it had been since they'd encountered a woman. With a chillingly wide grin and saliva dripping from his tongue, the man uttered a disturbing reassurance, "Don't worry, we're good guys." Based on the information provided, the man was being referenced as likely Red Storm, not Red Shirt. The armored figure, likely a knight or warrior, strode forward, flanked by other soldiers, assuring someone unseen that they would be taken care of, while a figure with light hair, possibly crouched or kneeling, pleaded desperately no. Amidst the rubble and debris, the armored knight gently reassured the frightened, red-haired woman, his words a soothing balm against the chaos surrounding them. Leaning in close, with a disturbingly wide grin, the man promised a gentleness that belied the terrifying glint in his eyes. Looming over the terrified pink-haired woman, the man with the dark, twisted grin leered, his words dripping with predatory intent as he grasped her leg, finding her helplessness a tempting invitation. With a resounding crash and a muttered "some things never change," a figure's foot, clad in a dark sneaker, came down hard, shattering the ground beneath it. With a chilling glare and a low growl, the white-haired man seethed, "You pieces of trash." His voice, laced with venom, dripped with contempt for his unseen adversaries. Alerted, a young man looked up, demanding to know who was there as a shadowy figure emerged from the dust cloud. A tense voice warned the newcomer against interfering, promising consequences for their intervention. Amidst the swirling dust and debris of a shattered landscape, a command rang out, "Get him." As a determined warrior, sword gleaming, braced for action, his gaze fixed on an unseen target. Knowing the plot of Red Shirt, the dark-haired man, likely Balin, furiously chased someone, his words a guttural "Die, brat," echoing his intent as his companion, armed with a sword and shield, followed close behind, their faces grim with determination. The Red Shirt, a blur of motion, plunged downwards, a deadly arc against the backdrop of a shattered cityscape, as another figure, wielding a wickedly curved blade, hurtled after him with lethal intent. A character, face contorted in a grimace of pain and blood splattering around, falls back, seemingly defeated. A second figure, their dark hair swept back, lunges forward with a blur of motion, a glint of metal suggesting a wielded weapon. The impact connects with another character below, sending more blood flying as they cry out in agony. The white-haired warrior, eyes blazing with an unsettling light, braced for impact. A sudden shift in perspective revealed another combatant, brown-haired and gritting his teeth, bracing for a powerful blow. With a fierce glint in his violet eyes, the silver-haired man delivered a brutal blow, sending his opponent reeling back in a spray of blood. Amidst the rubble, a desperate man, clutching a sword, warned a descending figure of his affiliation with the Tiger's Roar Guild, threatening dire consequences if harmed. Someone called out to the silver-haired young man, Eiji Kagawa, his voice echoing with an urgency that hinted at the gravity of the situation. He looked down, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and grim determination. A chilling question hung in the air, aimed at the silver-haired man with the scar tracing his cheek as he ran a hand through his hair, a dark glint in his eyes. A wave of disbelief washed over the man as a familiar face swam into view, his own contorting in a mask of shock and dawning horror as he stammered, incredulous, "Could it really be Mukajima?" The young man, clad in a purple tunic, recoiled in disbelief, his face contorted in a mask of shock and outrage, stammering about the impossibility of what he'd just witnessed. The armored warrior lunged forward, hand outstretched, as the white-haired man with glowing purple eyes loomed over him, radiating menacing power. The scarred warrior recoiled in disbelief, shouting a warning as he confronted someone unexpected, his shock and rage evident in his fierce expression. With a dark smirk and a chilling haw, the gray-haired man seemed to relish the impending confrontation. His hand lashed out with blurring speed, a strike aimed with deadly precision. With a chilling confirmation, a hand tightened around the man's throat, his face contorting in a grimace of pain and choked gasp escaping his lips. Gripping the dark-haired man by the throat, the white-haired figure declared his arduous climb from the depths of hell, attributing his torment entirely to the man he held captive. Against a backdrop of crumbling buildings, a man's scarred face contorted with a chilling blend of rage and anticipation as he ominously declared, "And now ... With a sharp command, someone urged the bloodied figure to move forward. Consumed by a surge of newfound power, the man, tears streaming down his face, clutched at his throat, a chilling vow escaping his lips to strip his unseen foe of every last shred of dignity. He roared, declaring this raw, untamed force as his own. A sinister, shadowy figure loomed, its voice a chorus of malice, urging death upon an unseen victim. Below, a young man with stark white hair and glowing eyes stood over a fallen figure, a grim determination etched on his face as he was hailed as the strongest. He seemed to exert his dominance, compelling the defeated one to submit to his will. Consumed by a bitter resentment, the man in the light jacket accused another, cowering on the ground, of endlessly tormenting his past self. He delivered a brutal kick, eliciting a pained groan from the victim. Consumed by the humiliation and helplessness of his situation, the dark-haired man swung a blunt object with grim determination. Driven by a furious resolve, the scarred man clutched his tattered shirt, vowing vengeance. Gripped by rage, the larger man, his face contorted in a cruel smirk, choked the smaller one, who struggled in his grasp, his own face a mask of pain and fury. The aggressor hissed, reveling in the other's humiliation, that crushing someone's spirit brought him perverse satisfaction. Biting his lip, the silver-haired warrior focused his gaze with fierce determination. His outstretched hand reached for something amidst the debris, fingers splayed wide. The white-haired man watched, a grim expression on his face, as the other man coughed and struggled on the ground. A tormented cry escaped his lips, no. As he clutched at his face, a fresh scar stark against his skin. He swore to himself he wouldn't become like the man before him, a chilling resolve hardening his gaze. Amidst the somber ruins, the armored knight knelt beside the weeping woman, a grim determination etched on his face as he gently cupped her cheek. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by her soft sobs, as a profound but echoed from the knight's lips, hinting at a conflict within. A scarred, silver-haired man, his eye glowing with an unsettling light, seethed with anger, the thought of his enemy still living fueling his rage. A grim premonition hung in the air. More lives would be lost. Beneath the dust-filled sky, a scarred man, his face set in a hard expression, looked upwards with a chilling intensity, his voice low as he addressed someone named Kagawa. Though spared from death after a failed assassination attempt, the defeated assailant was left in fearful anticipation as their would-be victim loomed, declaring they wouldn't escape unscathed. Panic seized the defeated warrior as they stammered, desperate to know their fate. With a split lip and a shadowed gaze, the young man seethed, his voice barely a whisper as he accused his tormentor of 2 years of relentless bullying. He promised retribution, his words laced with quiet fury, reduced to a single chilling declaration, one punch. With a furious glare and a single, devastating punch, the young man retaliated against those who preyed on the weak. Pinned to the ground, the young man in the light jacket glared up at his attacker, fury burning in his eyes as he spat accusations of attempted murder by truck. With a grunt of exertion, he delivered 2 swift punches. Tension hung heavy in the air as the imposing figure with silver hair offered a brutal bargain for blows to settle the score. A distraught voice, barely visible beneath the silver-haired man, choked out an apology, claiming full responsibility for whatever transgression had occurred. Amidst a crumbling cityscape, a man clad in light armor pleaded for mercy, his face etched with fear as he anticipated a devastating blow. Gripping the dark fabric, a man with a scarred face offered a chillingly calm "don't worry." Darkness consumed the scene, then a single eye, wide and bloodshot, filled the frame, reflecting a figure in red, seemingly falling towards an unknown fate. With a condescending promise to go easy, the silver-haired figure unleashed a brutal, swift attack, a flash of motion leaving a trail of light and blood. The dark-haired man, face contorted in a grimace of pain and fury, braced himself against the onslaught. Based on the provided images and the title red shirt, it seems we're picking up mid-action. The golden-armored warrior unleashed a powerful second punch, sending shockwaves through the air as his adversaries watched in stunned silence. A bloodied sword lay discarded on the ground, a grim testament to the ferocity of the battle. With a steely gaze and a burst of raw power, the white-haired warrior struck a decisive blow, declaring it the third. A shadowy figure, radiating an ominous aura, commanded the fallen, bleeding warrior to rise. The warrior, struggling to speak, could only manage a choked whisper. Battered and bruised, with blood trickling down his chest, the young man choked out a desperate plea for death. A brutal blow landed squarely on the man's face, sending a spray of blood into the air and distorting his vision with a flash of pain. With a brutal force, the white-haired man slammed his foot down, sending debris flying and his opponent crashing into the ground. Amidst the swirling chaos and debris, a young man with disheveled brown hair cried out, his face a mask of anguish and blood as dark crimson streaks flowed from his eyes. Amidst a desolate, crumbling cityscape, a scarred man with stark white hair stood, his presence heavy with the grim realization he was limbless and blind. He grimly confirmed his suspicions, a chilling acceptance settling over him. Amidst a chaotic backdrop of what appeared to be a ravaged town, a scarred, white-haired figure commanded that someone be taken to the hospital, their voice laced with urgency, and the panicked men quickly agreed to the order. Standing amidst the rubble of a devastated city, the silver-haired man issued a chilling warning to the fallen figures at his feet, commanding them to disappear from his sight forever. Based on my knowledge of the red shirt Manhwa, the scene likely depicts the aftermath of a fierce battle, with the dust settling around the warriors. One of the characters, perhaps the protagonist known for his red shirt though not visible in this panel, announces that the fight is over and they should press onward. The silver-haired man, his face etched with determination, turned towards the ravaged cityscape below. He announced their departure, a promise of returning home hanging in the air. Soaring high above the devastated metropolis, they left a shimmering trail against the grim backdrop of ruined buildings. The crumbling facade of a dilapidated building loomed, hinting at past devastation. The setting sun cast long shadows across more ruined structures, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The desolate scene was revealed to be the buffer zone of S-City, a place scarred by conflict. One soldier yearned for the perceived safety of wall watch duty. Another, gesturing towards the desolate landscape around them, grimly pointed out the silver lining of their current, less desirable assignment. At least they weren't actively fighting monsters. A gruff voice warned the rookie not to be a coward and fall off the wall if a monster appeared, eliciting laughter from the other soldiers. Tension hung heavy in the air as a stern-faced lieutenant, Tanji Kagura, warned his men to stay vigilant against an unseen threat. A subordinate saluted him sharply, acknowledging the order with a crisp "sir." As the lieutenant scanned the desolate cityscape, his expression a mixture of grim determination and apprehension. Though in the supposed safety of the buffer zone, where monsters from Area X rarely appeared, Private Shoki Matsura, a level 22 warrior, gripped his weapon, his face a mask of cautious vigilance, his words trailing off with a sense of foreboding. A colossal armored figure crashed down, sending soldiers scattering amidst a spray of blood and debris. A monstrous, shelled creature, the child of Kraken, emerged, its single, massive eye glaring down at the soldiers. One soldier urged his comrades to hold their formation and stay calm in the face of the terrifying level 45 beast. A volley of attacks, signaled by the cry "fire," erupted, illuminating the scene with bursts of energy. The target, a monstrous figure, recoiled from the barrage, a guttural roar escaping its gaping maw as its single, enormous, fiery eye widened in surprise and fury. Panic surged through the soldier as he realized their weapons were useless against the overwhelmingly powerful enemy. Bracing himself, a soldier readied his weapon as a monstrous figure, radiating a menacing aura, rapidly descended upon him. Amidst a chaotic scene, a soldier barked orders for his squad to disperse, their faces grim with tension. A monstrous, fleshy creature, its single eye pulsing with red veins, loomed over the battlefield. A soldier, caught in the creature's terrifying wake, was flung backwards, a spray of blood marking his trajectory. Another soldier, his back to the carnage, braced himself against the ensuing chaos. Amidst the chaos, a soldier, sweat dripping from his brow and eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination, roared a desperate command, "Shun." Amidst the debris of a shattered cityscape, the soldier, small against the backdrop of destruction, cursed at a monstrous, unseen octopus. With a fierce determination etched on his face, the soldier charged forward, vowing to take down his target amidst a hail of gunfire from his comrades. Knowing the overall plot of Red Shirt helps contextualize this scene as a likely battle against a formidable monster. Laser fire rained down on the monstrous creature, each shot sparking against its thick hide, but the beast seemed unfazed, its massive tentacles flailing wildly in the devastated arena. The soldier, burdened by his heavy pack, trudged through the desolate, smoke-filled ruins of a city, the monstrous form of a creature looming overhead. A group of soldiers, clad in tactical gear, cautiously advanced across a sterile, tiled floor, their weapons raised. Beneath them, a monstrous, fleshy appendage twitched, its immense, yellow eye opening to reveal a dark, bottomless pupil. Amidst the chaos, the soldier, face etched with disbelief, registered a sudden, chilling silence as the relentless assault abruptly ceased. A monstrous, single-eyed behemoth descended, its enormous form casting a chilling shadow over the awestruck soldiers below. Amidst a ravaged cityscape, a soldier's face, hardened by battle, contorted in disbelief, a whispered "what?" escaping his lips as another soldier beside him mirrored the shock. The soldier, his face hardened, bared his teeth in a menacing grin, a question hanging in the air: was his opponent afraid? A monstrous, fleshy form pulsed and throbbed, a single, malevolent eye glaring down. The creature, now fragmented and weakened, crashed to the ground, its remaining eyes still burning with furious energy. A soldier, weapon raised, watched the creature's demise, his stance suggesting both fear and grim determination. Two soldiers, faces etched with fear, scrambled through the debris, one clutching a box tightly, as if it held the key to their survival, while the other voiced their shared confusion about the unseen terror haunting them. Gripping a crucial package, the helmeted soldier pressed on through the dusty, debris-filled battlefield, his face contorted in a fierce grimace, declaring this their only opportunity. Amidst a ruined cityscape, a figure lunged forward, a blur of motion against the backdrop of destruction, while others took cover, weapons raised. A massive, bladed object hurtled downwards, sparks flying as it met resistance, accompanied by a chilling command of death. A devastating explosion ripped through the battlefield, sending soldiers scrambling for cover amidst the swirling debris and scorching heat. Amidst the swirling dust and debris of a ravaged cityscape, the soldiers, their faces grim and strained, exchanged a worried glance, questioning the success of their mission. A monstrous figure, shrouded in smoke and radiating a menacing aura, crumbled, its single, malevolent eye dimming as power drained from its form. A monstrous figure, emanating a pulsating, ominous glow from its single eye, loomed over the soldier, who looked up in startled confusion. Amidst a chaotic, dust-filled scene, the soldier stared in disbelief, his face contorted in a mask of shock and horror as he realized someone had emerged unscathed from what should have been a fatal situation. A monstrous figure unleashed a devastating attack, sending debris flying through the air. The sheer force of the blow shocked a nearby soldier, his cry of alarm echoing through the chaotic scene. Another soldier recoiled in horror as the monstrous figure continued its relentless assault. A soldier, face streaked with blood and eyes wide with terror, registered a silent question. Another soldier, gripped by a fierce determination, revealed the source of their fear. Amidst a scene of devastation, the white-haired man stood, his eyes glowing ominously, a question of blame hanging heavy in the smoky air. Is it because of him? Awe and disbelief rippled through the ranks of the soldiers as they absorbed the news. A single, devastating blow had felled the monstrous creature that had withstood an explosion. A hardened warrior observed another, his gaze sharp and calculating, noting the immense, S-rank destructive power radiating from the newcomer. He realized with a start that this formidable presence was utterly unfamiliar. Amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, the silver-haired man declared his unwavering resolve to uncover the identity of a mysterious figure, his subordinate standing at attention nearby. His advanced inspect skill, a tool for gathering detailed information, hummed with potential as he closed in on his unknown target. The grizzled officer's eyes widened in disbelief, a shocked what? Escaping his lips as he registered the impossible scene before him, murmuring in stunned denial, "No way." A system alert flashed, demanding respect as the gray-haired man walked forward, his head bowed slightly in what could be either contemplation or defeat. A jolt of alarm shot through him as he realized he couldn't access the other person's information. He recoiled, a blur of motion and shock, his eyes wide with dawning fear. Amidst the chaos and debris of a ravaged battlefield, a cry of "Lieutenant!" pierced the air as an officer stumbled and fell. Panic rippled through the remaining soldiers as they rushed to his side, questions of what happened echoing around them. A soldier's horrified face filled the frame as he desperately yelled for a medic, the lieutenant's life hanging in the balance. Amidst a desolate backdrop, the white-haired man paused, a silent question hanging in the air. Amidst the debris-strewn landscape, a soldier called out to the white-haired man, indicating he had a question for him. The white-haired man, his back turned, paused and curtly replied with a questioning yes. Amidst the desolate, crumbling cityscape, the white-haired man urgently inquired about the distance to evacuation shelter 6. 50 kilometers north was the destination, a voice announced, but the soldier's face contorted in a grimace as the caveat followed. The only route lay through the ominous Area X. The white-haired man, his expression thoughtful, muttered Area X under his breath, a hint of intrigue in his gaze as he looked towards the hazy horizon. Amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, a man in a sharp suit listened as a soldier explained the strategic importance of the area, where monsters were being contained to minimize collateral damage. He then gestured towards the intense battleground, teeming with hunters bravely engaging the monstrous horde. The white-haired man's eyes widened in awe, realizing he had stumbled upon a treasure trove of rare drops. As soldiers swarmed a colossal, fallen monster, one of them, distinguished by a vibrant red scarf, seemed to pick up an item that shimmered with otherworldly energy, prompting a stunned question about whether defeating monsters in the real world yielded tangible rewards, as in a game. The red scarf soldier, examining his prize, muttered in awe about the uncanny resemblance of this reality to a video game. Amidst the desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, the silver-haired man inquired about the defeated monster's strength, his tone laced with a chilling curiosity. The soldier, his face etched with a mixture of concern and apprehension, realized he was facing a formidable level 45 opponent. Observing the unfolding chaos, the silver-haired man mused that this was already enough to challenge them. His gaze hardened as he inquired about the number of high-level monsters within the ongoing rush. The soldier, his face grim and a cut visible on his jaw, estimated there were no more than 100 of those creatures. He spoke with a sense of urgency and relief, remarking that if such monsters were commonplace, humanity would have been wiped out long ago. With a curt nod of understanding and a quick thanks, "I'll be off then," the silver-haired man turned and departed the scene. A startled gasp escaped another's lips as they witnessed the swift exit. The silver-haired man in the dark suit walked away, his steps echoing on the cracked pavement, leaving the soldier stammering a hesitant double quotes in his wake. Under a dusky sky, a soldier nervously began to speak, cautiously phrasing a potentially outrageous proposition to the stoic, silver-haired man beside him. With a heavy heart and a strained voice, a plea was made, "But please, go to Area X." As the soldier bowed his head, the weight of the situation evident in his posture. Someone, seemingly in awe of the powerful hunter before them, expressed their fervent hope that with such strength, countless lives could be rescued. The grim-faced man with silver hair, standing amidst the desolate backdrop of a ruined city, was asked if the quickest path to Shelter 6 was through the perilous Area X. A terse yes was his only reply. With a curt "all right," then the silver-haired man in the suit turned, leaving the soldier bewildered. A confused "huh" escaped the soldier's lips as he stared at the departing figure. The man paused, glancing back with an unspoken challenge. "Then you will." The silver-haired man, his jaw set with determination, prepared to traverse the ominous Area X, vowing to vanquish any monster foolish enough to cross his path. The story begins at a frontline rear military camp, a drab tent and rugged jeep suggesting a tense atmosphere. The soldier groaned, stirring in what seemed to be a medical bay, his hand instinctively reaching for his chest. The lieutenant, clad in camouflage, jolted awake in what appeared to be a military tent, a voice excitedly announcing his return to consciousness. The officer, stirring in a hazy state, questioned how long he had been unconscious, a hand reflexively rising to his mouth. A nearby soldier, clad in similar camouflage, promptly informed him that he'd been out for approximately 10 minutes. The soldier, a cunning glint in his eyes, examined the glowing green vial, marveling at the instant efficacy of the monster-dropped recovery item. The grim-faced officer, his features hardened under the camouflage cap, posed a pointed question about the mysterious man who had rescued them earlier. In a dimly lit military tent, a soldier in camouflage fatigues relayed gravely that someone had journeyed north. The soldier, adjusting his camouflage cap, muttered grimly about the north, a shadow of apprehension crossing his face. The military officer, face contorted in disbelief, held up a hand as if to stop the words echoing in his ears, demanding to know what had just been said. A soldier, his face a mask of stunned disbelief, returned to evacuation Shelter 6, a premonition of something ominous hanging heavy in the air. A soldier, sweat beading on his temple, watched with intense focus, a question hanging heavy in the air: would the newcomer dare to enter the perilous Area X? Confirming his superior's order, the soldier reported the red shirt's seemingly indifferent departure, his own face a mask of stunned disbelief as he watched him walk away without a second thought. Tension crackled in the air as a soldier, his face grim, received urgent orders to contact Central Command immediately. The lieutenant's face contorted in disbelief as he heard a chilling question about the Central Command Center. The officer, his camouflage uniform stark against the dim light, rubbed his temple, a grim expression etched on his face as he realized they had only 10 minutes left. Glancing at his watch, he determinedly noted the time, confident he could make the deadline. The soldier, breathless and urgent, pulled back the tent flap, announcing he'd just sent out a desperate message for help using the emergency radio. Inside a dimly lit tent, a tense exchange unfolded as one soldier, sweat beading on his brow, questioned another about the Central Command Center while handing over a phone. The officer, gripping a device, announced this operation was unlike any before. He revealed the information was classified, hence their prior unawareness. A military officer, illuminated by the holographic projection from his device, revealed that Area X, their base of operations, lay outside the monster containment zone. As the connection flickered to life, the grizzled officer, face hardened by experience, declared the area a bombing zone. Tension filled the control room as the officers watched the unfolding events on the glowing screens, their postures a mix of concern and resignation, except for one reddish-haired woman who leaned back, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. A tense operator, her expression hardening, responded to a sudden emergency call crackling through her headset from Area 22. Central Commander Renji Kumagawa, a level 58 flame mage, leaned back with a dark smirk, ordering someone to be put through. The woman with the headset responded with a sharp "Yes, sir." As she focused intently on her computer screen, fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting the final characters of a coded message. Lieutenant Kagura's stern face appeared on a screen, his voice sharp and official as he announced his intent to deliver a report. He stood at attention, his posture rigid, before a group of seated officers, his expression grim. A grim-faced officer announced that a mysterious hunter had unknowingly entered the soon-to-be bomb zone, a crucial detail seemingly missed in the operations planning. The blond officer, chin resting thoughtfully on his fist, responded with a curt "so." To an unseen speaker, his expression a mixture of boredom and annoyance. He was then pointedly asked if his sole purpose there was merely to confess a blunder. The grizzled officer, sweat beading on his brow, vehemently denied an unseen accusation. A grim-faced officer, clutching a device projecting a holographic image of another man, insisted on an emergency broadcast to warn of an impending bombing. Someone urgently called out to Lieutenant Kagura from the holographic projection. The officer, face contorted with urgency, declared someone's strength while simultaneously lamenting that they couldn't let him perish in such a way. In a high-tech control room, a stern-faced officer's image flickered on a large screen, his presence demanding attention as the operators below murmured about his formidable strength as a hunter. A stern-faced officer, clad in a crisp blue uniform, inquired about someone's level, a hint of suspicion in his tone. The grizzled officer, his face etched with strain, groaned in frustration, admitting his ignorance. A man in a military uniform appeared on a large screen, observed by figures in dark suits, one of whom let out a low, mirthless chuckle. A blond man, seemingly a person of authority, contemplated the news of a reckless hunter who ventured into a dangerous bombing zone, disregarding established protocols. With an air of disbelief and annoyance, he questioned the necessity of an emergency broadcast for the rule breaker. The woman in the sharp suit delivered a grim prognosis, her voice laced with the chilling certainty that the message they were sending would arrive too late. The blond man, his face etched with a dark amusement, adjusted his collar with a low chuckle, a sinister sound escaping his lips. The stout, uniformed man erupted in boisterous laughter, a cruel glint in his eyes, after being told his lack of intellect was compensated by an unexpected comedic flair. Observing the struggling figures before him, the blond man, with a grim expression, remarked on their apparent lack of training and ability to function independently. The woman beside him, her face shadowed, remained silent, the unspoken tension heavy in the air. With a sly smirk, the blond officer leaned back, subtly dismissing the notion of interfering with someone else's subordinates, his eyes glancing towards the screen displaying a stoic face figure. He added with a touch of sarcasm that it wasn't really his place to get involved in their affairs. The blond man leaned in, a thinly veiled threat in his smirk, warning the other that obstructing the operation would have dire consequences. The other, a stoic figure with golden hair, listened with a cool indifference, their gaze unwavering. Mitonosaki, the Western commander and golem tamer, glared with suspicion and anger, questioning the dubious loyalty of someone dragging down their own people in the face of a formidable enemy. Leaning back in his chair, the blond officer smirked, thinking someone was a complete idiot. Despite Kagura's meticulous training, he was defying orders, risking the entire operation to save a complete stranger. The blond officer observed the situation, her expression a mask of conflicted emotions. A man, his face etched with a mixture of awe and apprehension, wondered about the sheer power of someone he'd just witnessed. Having analyzed the red shirt manhwa, I can offer this retelling. The grizzled sergeant, face etched with concern, addressed his fellow soldiers in hushed tones. Elsewhere, a blond officer stood in contemplation, her arms crossed tightly, a silent ellipsis hanging heavy in the air. Lieutenant Kagura, arms crossed and a subtle smirk playing on her lips, sat confidently as a veiled threat hung in the air about not interfering with their plans. A steely gaze pierced the air, the threat hanging heavy. Without a satisfactory explanation, a military tribunal awaited. The officer's face, etched with dawning comprehension and a hint of disbelief, contorted as he uttered a surprise that's. A tense inquiry hung in the air, directed at the Major General, his shadowed face revealing little of his thoughts as the blond officer beside him considered the implications. A scarred, grim-faced man with spiky blonde hair clicked his tongue in annoyance. Lieutenant Kagura, a stern-faced man in a sharp uniform, was pressed for an acceptable explanation. A military officer, his face etched with a mixture of shock and awe, barked a confirmation. He relayed the unbelievable news. Someone had just single-handedly obliterated a level 45 baby kraken with a single devastating blow. Stunned, the blonde-haired individual gasped, "What?" with wide, disbelieving eyes. The blonde woman's eyes widened, a bead of sweat trickling down her temple, as she realized the figure before her possessed power for surpassing even an A-rank hunter. Her mind raced, a chilling possibility taking hold. Could this individual be an elusive S-rank hunter, one of the military's hidden assets? Inside a futuristic control room, a tense discussion unfolded as a blonde officer exclaimed in disbelief that all S-rank personnel were already deployed. A heavyset officer, his brow furrowed in concern, confirmed the grim news there was no signal from B-22. Tension crackled in the air as a stern-faced officer on a digital screen demanded to know why the blonde woman, seated with her back to the viewer, was unaware of someone's level. She was sharply reminded of her inspect skill, clearly meant to provide such information. The military officer, his face etched with a mixture of awe and concern, admitted he couldn't gauge the other's power level. The blonde woman, sharply dressed in a suit, registered something unexpected, her eyes widening with a flicker of surprise. Mortified, the man in the military cap confessed that after using his skill, he blacked out from an overwhelming surge of information. A figure, clad in muted gray, tapped a finger with quiet intensity, acknowledging a rare and formidable strength. The officer, his face grim and determined, declared that whatever had just happened was insufficient to halt their current mission. In a dimly lit command center, agreement hung in the air as someone off-panel concurred with the ongoing discussion. The stern-faced Eastern commander, Nobuo Yuasa, a formidable level 40 for rock mage, declared their unwavering commitment to their military duties, refusing to abandon their responsibilities based on vague and unsubstantiated claims. A large-scale military operation was underway, involving thousands of troops from 4 different corps. The grim-faced officer studied the holographic map, noting the strategic placement of forces around the designated bombing and buffer zones, confident in the complete encirclement of the target area. A strategic holographic map illuminated the darkroom, highlighting a planned bombing and its ominous aftermath. The plan was for the scattered monsters to be eliminated by soldiers within the garrison zone. However, a looming sense of foreboding hung in the air as the possibility of an emergency broadcast was mentioned. A cunning plan was hatched, using sound to lure the monsters into a single, deadly trap. A holographic map displayed the converging paths of the beast, marked by crossed-out shield icons toward the intended kill zone. The grizzled military officer, seated in what appeared to be a command center, grimly assessed the dire situation. If their current course of action failed, the entire area would be lost in moments, costing the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers. He wrestled with the heavy implication. Could one life truly be worth sacrificing so many? The grizzled elder, his face etched with a weighty decision, declared that even the prowess of an S-rank hunter couldn't justify the immense risk they faced. A hushed apology escaped his lips, his clasped hands betraying a hint of inner turmoil. The officer, face pale and a bead of sweat trickling down his temple, stared in stunned silence at the glowing energy blade as an almost inaudible groan escaped his lips. The blonde officer, displayed on a holographic screen, appeared deep in thought, a pensive silence hanging in the air as 2 uniformed figures observed her from below. With a resolute expression, the blonde-haired woman declared her decision, rejecting the unseen speaker's plea. Her face hardened as she explained her refusal stemmed from a greater responsibility to many, rather than the needs of one. A commanding officer declared a final, irrevocable decision, his voice ringing with authority, while another soldier below looked up in stunned silence. A hand, clad in camouflage, held a device displaying the chilling words "Connection terminated." Inside a dimly lit tent, a stern-faced officer, identifiable by his cap, presented a phone, his expression suggesting a grim message or order, while 2 soldiers reacted with a mix of surprise and apprehension. Having analyzed the Manhwa red shirt asterisk, I can offer this summary of the provided scene. A gloved hand tightened around a weapon as an ominous rustling sound filled the air. Another soldier addressed his lieutenant with a grave tone. The lieutenant, weary and dirt-streaked, received a somber acknowledgement of his efforts. Tension crackled in the air as the grim-faced officer clenched his fist, his subordinate watching with a mixture of apprehension and resignation. The grizzled military officer, his face etched with a mix of determination and grim acceptance, confirmed someone's words, his gaze intense. He muttered darkly about the importance of the bigger picture, his words laced with a chilling undercurrent. A steely gaze hardened beneath the brim of the man's cap, a spark of intense focus in his eyes. A set of keys dangling from his camouflage pants swung slightly, a subtle movement in the otherwise still frame. A gloved hand reached out, fingers brushing against a metallic surface. A startled gasp echoed as a uniformed figure stumbled back, eyes wide with shock and a question escaping their lips. What are you? A soldier, amidst a devastated cityscape, desperately urged someone to return as the impending bombing was about to commence. With 6 minutes left on the clock, another soldier sprinted towards a waiting jeep, seemingly defying the urgent recall. Gripping the controls, the helmeted soldier, face taut with determination, muttered that there was still time, his vehicle hurtling forward with a roar. A furious officer roared a threat of court-martial at Private Matsuura, who was seemingly disobeying a direct order. Ignoring the officer's command to return, Matsuura sped away in a jeep, leaving a trail of dust and defiance. From the back of another vehicle, a soldier watched Matsuura's escape with wide-eyed alarm. A jeep screeched to a halt in the desolate, ruined streets as soldiers, tense and wary, watched it retreat. Amidst the tense atmosphere of a military base, a soldier anxiously inquired of his lieutenant whether they should retrieve someone. The grizzled soldier, adjusting his camouflage cap, muttered a strained reassurance that everything was fine. The grizzled officer, his face etched with a mixture of resolve and concern, seemed to have reached a critical juncture. He appeared confident that the person in question understood the gravity of their choice and the potential consequences that lay ahead. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, the driver, clad in what appeared to be a military-style jacket, muttered with urgency about the pressing need to be on time. Tension crackled in the air as a soldier, face grim and jaw clenched, seemed to suppress a surge of anger or frustration. Another soldier, wearing a similar uniform, appeared weary and apprehensive, unaware of the impending doom Matsuura was oblivious to. A chilling realization dawned upon the white-haired man as he stared at the cloaked figure wielding a chain mace. Could this be the very person he had been desperately trying to rescue? The white-haired warrior, eyes blazing with an otherworldly light, unleashed a surge of power, shattering a shadowy, chained figure looming above him. The hope for all mankind rested on his shoulders. Frustration twisted the soldier's face as he realized he'd lost his quarry's trail. The soldier, his face grim and determined, scanned his surroundings, a question burning in his mind. Where had the other gone? The digital clock on the car's dashboard blinked 16 hours 56 minutes and 12 seconds as someone announced they were taking the fastest route. The soldier, grim-faced, wondered if his quarry's speed surpassed even his vehicle's as the chase continued. His vehicle rumbled closer, Area X looming just ahead. Gripping the steering wheel, the man with the stern face considered blasting the loudspeaker, hoping it would reach whoever he was trying to contact. The soldier, his jaw clenched tight with a grim realization, understood the risky nature of his plan. Alerting his allies would also warn the enemy. A clock ticked down in the background, adding to the tension of the rapidly approaching deadline. With a determined slam of his hand, the soldier declared it didn't matter. He gripped the receiver tightly, a heavy breath escaping his lips. A lone vehicle sped through a desolate, war-torn cityscape, buildings crumbling around it. A gloved hand gripped a communication device, the speaker's voice filled with self-recrimination, lamenting their failure to uphold the army's standards. A sharp intake of breath escaped the man's lips, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes as dust motes danced in the air around him. A soldier, face grim and determined, reappeared, recognizing the person he'd helped earlier. His voice was urgent, strained with warning as he shouted that the area was about to be bombed, commanding immediate evacuation. He roared the urgent evacuation order again, his face a mask of desperation and fear. Amidst a crumbling cityscape, a voice urgently commanded evacuation as a white-haired figure strode purposefully through the debris, leaving a fallen, armored form in his wake. Amidst the smoky haze, the silver-haired man's gaze sharpened, a question forming on his lips about a possible bombing. He grimly realized the absence of other hunters was due to the apparent devastation. Amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, the white-haired man, his expression grim, observed with a dismissive air, noting that the monsters themselves posed little threat. A warship soared overhead, its missile poised for launch, as the silver-haired man below contemplated the fiery inferno it would unleash, questioning his own resilience against the impending blast. He decided against unnecessary risks, his expression hardening with resolve. The white-haired man stood amidst falling debris, realizing with a jolt the soldier's selfless act of risking his life to deliver the bombing warning. Driven by a fierce determination, the soldier vowed not to let his comrade perish in this desolate place. Gazing out at the ruined cityscape through the vehicle's windshield, he anxiously wondered if he'd reached his friend in time. The soldier, face contorted in a grimace of terror, realized he had become a beacon for the monstrous horde. Gripping the steering wheel, he desperately sought escape, the digital clock ticking down the precious seconds. A foot slammed down on the gas pedal, the car lurching forward. The driver's shadowed face, partially hidden by a dark hood, held a grim determination as he thought about his target, who was still at large. Amidst a crumbling, debris-strewn landscape, a lone figure in a military jeep navigated the treacherous terrain, his startled exclamation echoing the precariousness of his situation. A startled face pressed against a vehicle's window, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and relief. Outside, a figure with gray hair and a face partially obscured by fabric leaned down, expressing heartfelt gratitude for the other's survival. Leaning close to the vehicle, the silver-haired man delivered chilling news of an impending bombing, leaving the bewildered driver inside visibly shaken. Gripped by panic, the driver in camouflage slammed his hand against the steering wheel, a desperate "oh, no," escaping his lips as the clock ticked relentlessly towards a deadline. A tense silence hung in the air as the digital clock flashed 17 hours 0 minutes and 0 seconds, confirming their worst fear. They were officially out of time. Fighter jets soared through the sky, launching a barrage of missiles towards a massive, descending spacecraft. The spacecraft plummeted towards the ground, engulfed in fiery explosions as the missiles struck. A figure with spiky, light-colored hair braced themselves amidst the chaos of the crashing ship and ensuing destruction. A jeep sped recklessly through a devastated cityscape, its lone passenger crying out in alarm as debris rained down around them. The ground rushed up to meet someone's descending foot, the impact shaking the very earth. A figure continued their rapid descent, the wind whipping past as the ground loomed closer. Based on the Manhwa red shirt, the narrative unfolds as follows. A man in a dark coat is flung from an exploding jeep, debris scattering around him in a chaotic flurry. An urgent voice cries out, addressing a major general amidst the chaos. A holographic map displays a critical situation unfolding, marked by ominous bomb icons and a progress bar ticking ominously towards 100%. As the confirmation of the bombing's completion echoed in the command center, the headset-clad woman slammed her hand on the console, the tension palpable. A sharp, determined order followed. Drones were to be deployed immediately to assess the damage, count the monster casualties, and locate any surviving refugees. Gripping his hands together, a blond man with a hardened gaze absorbed the gravity of the situation, his expression a mix of grim satisfaction and simmering intensity. The drone feed displayed a chilling emptiness, devoid of any life signs. A wave of panic washed over the operator as they frantically searched the now empty screen, demanding to know where the escaped monsters had vanished to. Sweat beaded on the communicator's brow as he relayed the grim news. The monsters remain within the bombing zone. Eyes wide with alarm, the news anchor with the headset delivered a shocking report. Those at the heart of the bombing were miraculously unharmed. The blonde officer erupted in disbelief, his face contorted in shock as he stammered in denial, while a woman beside him, also in uniform, watched with wide, startled eyes. Tension crackled in the air as the blonde woman, her face etched with concern and frustration, sharply demanded an update on the drone feed. Tension filled the air as the woman in the sharp uniform frantically typed, her face a mask of concern. A large screen flickered to life, revealing a grid-like pattern and drawing the attention of the assembled personnel. A blonde individual, back to the reader, watched the unfolding scene intently. Amidst the chaos and destruction, a glimmer of hope emerged as a shield materialized, prompting a stunned observer to question its origin. The monstrous figures lurking in the background became the immediate suspects, their potential creation of the shield raising both fear and a flicker of desperate hope. A sudden realization struck, tinged with disbelief. Amidst the swirling chaos, a figure emerged, cloaked and enigmatic, prompting a hushed whisper of astonishment. A cloaked figure stood on a precipice, their back to the viewer, a tattered cape billowing in the wind. Suddenly, a chilling message crackled through the air. A drone had been attacked by a monster. A monstrous figure, radiating a terrifying aura, roared in fury, its body convulsing with power as ethereal blue streaks crackled around it. A dark, textured surface, possibly stone or earth, filled the space below, hinting at the aftermath of a devastating impact. The monstrous figure, with glowing red eyes and jagged horns, tightened its grip on the metallic object, sparks flying as its claws dug into the surface. Panic filled the command center as the technicians realized they had lost all communication with their target, a chilling silence replacing the usual chatter and beeps. The blonde officer, her face etched with bewilderment, recalled the warnings of a different kind of attack. She questioned aloud the nature of the unsettling event she had just witnessed, her tone edged with unease. The blonde-haired individual realized with a start, eyes widening in alarm, that their drone surveillance had been compromised. A grizzled military officer, his face contorted with a mixture of fear and urgency, barked orders for the immediate evacuation of all soldiers from the garrison. His voice strained with tension, he repeated the command, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple as the gravity of the situation pressed down. Amidst the chaos, the blonde officer barked orders for a full retreat, urging her troops to hold the defensive line. Tension crackled in the control room as the headset-clad operator realized with dawning horror that whatever they were, their trajectory was anything but predictable. The officers in the futuristic control room reacted with startled cries and wide eyes as something unexpected unfolded before them. The blonde officer, her face etched with concern, demanded to know where they were going. In a tense command center, an officer directed the blonde soldier to Area B-22, pointing decisively at a strategic map displaying their current operation. Eyes widening with dawning comprehension, the blonde-haired figure realized the mysterious hunter's path. With a determined glint in her eye, the blonde officer barked orders to send all remaining drones to investigate the sudden halt in the monster's advance. A devastated cityscape lay in ruins, scarred by explosions and shrouded in dust. Amidst the wreckage, a soldier, his face etched with disbelief, realized the bombing had ceased. Against a backdrop of smoke and fire, a soldier, eyes wide with disbelief, gasped, realizing he had survived. Another soldier, seemingly unfazed by the surrounding chaos, hopped out of a vehicle, laughing triumphantly at his own survival. A grim realization dawned on the silver-haired man as a soldier warned him that the monsters, still very much alive, were approaching their location. His gaze hardened, a scar on his face a stark reminder of past battles, as he braced himself for the impending confrontation. With a fierce urgency, the silver-haired man shoved a soldier to the ground, yelling at him to take cover as some unseen force whizzed past. The soldier, caught off guard, cried out in alarm as he tumbled downwards. A downed drone lay amidst the rocky terrain, its camera lens staring blankly upwards as a figure in camouflage gear cautiously approached, wondering aloud if it belonged to the military. Amidst a desolate, debris-strewn landscape, a question hung heavy in the air: had the monsters attacked the drone? The white-haired man, his expression grim, seemed to ponder the implications, while beside him, a soldier's face was a mask of shocked disbelief, voicing his astonishment that such an event had never occurred before. Against a backdrop of blurred urban decay, the silver-haired man's profile was sharp, his gaze holding a hint of knowing amusement as he advised someone to save their astonishment for later. Amidst the crumbling cityscape and swirling dust, a desperate escape was underway. The group, pursued by monstrous figures, scrambled across the debris, their movements urgent and frantic. With a shared sense of peril, they made a run for it, their hopes pinned on outrunning the looming threat. A helmeted figure gasped in alarm, their face a mask of fear. Suddenly, looming over the ravaged landscape, monstrous figures with levels ranging from 50 to 90 materialized, their menacing presence palpable. The cloaked figure, seemingly unfazed by the imposing creatures, uttered a low, chilling remark about the newly arrived foes. The highest-level group in the current rush was revealed, their leader a formidable figure whose power level reached an intimidating 90. Amidst the smoky ruins of a bombing, a soldier, his face streaked with grime but miraculously unscathed, stared in disbelief at the devastation, a chilling premonition gripping him that all was lost. Amidst the devastation of a bombed-out city, a soldier clutched his head in despair, convinced they were doomed. The other men, seemingly unfazed by the destruction surrounding them, grimly observed that if a bombing hadn't killed their enemy, they were in serious trouble. A menacing grin spread across the scarred, white-haired man's face as his violet eyes glowed with a dangerous light, a chilling promise of brutal violence escaping his lips. Amidst a chaotic, rubble-strewn landscape, a silver-haired man in a dark suit propelled himself forward with an almost superhuman speed, leaving a blurred streak in his wake, as he urgently directed someone below to seek cover in a jeep. A shrouded figure, eyes glowing eerily green, lunged forward with menacing speed, a smaller, glowing figure barely visible in their wake. With a deafening roar, the silver-haired man slammed his hand against the crumbling wall, a dark, ominous chain whipping past him with terrifying speed. With a swift, decisive motion, the white-haired man deflected the incoming attack, a dark shadow momentarily eclipsing his determined gaze. The hulking, armored figure, its eyes glowing ominously, lunged forward with a terrifying roar. With a burst of speed, the white-haired youth narrowly dodged the monstrous blow, the ground shuddering where the attack landed. A dark figure, cloaked and radiating a violet aura, descended swiftly from the sky, leaving a luminous trail in their wake, as a hulking figure below braced for impact. A menacing, shadowy figure loomed, a single crimson eye gleaming with an unsettling intensity. With a surge of power and a fierce glint in his violet eyes, the white-haired warrior unleashed a devastating blow. A blinding flash of energy tore through the air, aimed directly at a massive, shadowy beast. A colossal figure, cloaked in tattered green, crumbled under a fiery sky, watched by two small figures amidst the cascading debris. Amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, a white-haired man stood defiantly, his tense posture suggesting imminent confrontation. A cloaked figure descended dramatically from the dust-filled sky, their presence radiating an ominous aura. The white-haired man looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and apprehension. A scarred warrior, eyes narrowed with a mixture of confusion and alarm, realized with a jolt that he could no longer sense his opponent's presence. The cloaked figure, face partially obscured by shadows, murmured with a chilling satisfaction, "I've finally double quotes," his voice trailing off as a sinister grin spread across his lips. Dark, sinuous tendrils pulsed and writhed against a muted backdrop. A blinding light erupted from a central point, pushing back the encroaching darkness. Tendrils recoiled, hissing as if burned, revealing a glowing, almost crystalline form at the heart of the maelstrom. A cloaked figure, radiating an ominous aura, materialized from swirling darkness, uttering a chilling "found you double quotes" as tendrils of shadow reached for their seemingly unconscious target clad in green. A monstrous figure, consumed by shadows and radiating malevolent energy, loomed, a single, piercing red eye gleaming with predatory intent, while behind him, a cloaked figure with a sinister grin watched as if anticipating the chaos about to unfold. The scene was punctuated with the ominous title, Seat of the Abyss. A monstrous figure, with a jagged helmet and a chilling grin, loomed over a smaller figure in white, roaring accusations of theft and demanding the return of what was rightfully his, while a lone figure in red observed the scene from a distance. The white-haired man, his face etched with the recent scar, looked up, a flicker of confusion in his eyes as he questioned what was being discussed. The cloaked figure, shrouded in darkness and with silver hair framing a grim face, channeled the potent, glowing energy, condemning someone for stealing another's power. The sharply dressed man, his white hair stark against the darkening sky, plummeted towards a jagged, shadowy abyss, a chilling decree echoing behind him. You must pay with your life. A terrifying mass of dark, pointed shapes rushed up to meet him, the air thick with the sound of tearing metal and sparking embers. Dark, jagged lines erupted from beneath the figure, hinting at a sinister power unleashed. The white-haired man, his face grim and a fresh cut on his cheek, summoned shadowy, blade-like tendrils that crackled with dark energy. The white-haired warrior, his gaze piercing and intense, gripped his shadowy weapon, a dark energy crackling around it, and scoffed at his opponent, implying their efforts were insufficient. With a darkly gleaming spear clutched in his hand, the white-haired man flung a defiant challenge downwards, his voice echoing with the certainty of his survival. A shadowed figure, cloaked and ominous, loomed below, the air crackling with unspoken power. With a surge of power, the white-haired man braced himself, his spear crackling with ominous energy. Having unleashed a devastating attack, the shrouded figure watched as their target plummeted from the sky. A lone ship spiraled downwards, trailing smoke against the backdrop of a pale sky. The hooded observer, with glowing red eyes, tracked the ship's descent with an unnerving intensity. The cloaked figure with stark white hair, startled, questioned if Odin's raven was observing them. They quickly corrected themselves, realizing it was a mere human-made imitation. A shout of "Hey!" pierced the air as a figure blurred with speed, dodging a deadly attack. The attacker, shadowed and determined, pressed their assault, their weapon whistling through the air. With a steely gaze, the defender taunted, "If you truly want to kill me, you'll have to try harder." With a surge of power and a taunt to take him seriously, the white-haired warrior lunged, his crimson-wreathed spear aimed at his opponent's heart. With a fierce grunt, the white-haired man plunged his dark blade deep into the heart of the monstrous, green entity, unleashing a shockwave of energy that ripped through the air. A dark, ominous spear pulsed with unsettling energy as it pierced the air. The white-haired man, his face etched with concern, watched as his opponent vanished into thin air. Overwhelmed with disgust, the dark figure lamented being observed by the vile humans, their shadowy forms splayed on the tiled floor. The cloaked figure, back to the viewer, surveyed the desolate, crumbling cityscape with a dismissive air, muttering about the inferiority of the beings below. Disgusted by something unseen, the cloaked figure with flowing silver hair lashed out, a ripple of power emanating from their outstretched hand. The words make me sick hanging heavy in the air. Having analyzed the red shirt Manhwa, the scene depicts a fierce aerial battle. A monstrous, pale-winged dragon swooped down, its attack sending sparks flying from the dark, mechanical armor of its airborne opponent. Amidst a smoky, dragon-filled sky, a cloaked figure commanded the elimination of all observers. The last rays of the setting sun glinted off the windows of a towering, impersonal building, hinting at the drama unfolding within. A masked figure, his eyes narrowed in frustration, watched as a monstrous, winged creature soared away, having just demolished his drone. Gripping a device tightly, the hooded figure, sweat beading on his brow, muttered to himself about miraculously completing his mission against the odds. A grainy image on a monitor revealed the reason for the monster's altered trajectory: a lone figure with white hair, clad in dark attire, walking purposefully across a stark, tiled floor. The implication hung heavy in the air. This individual was the key to the unfolding chaos. The grizzled hunter, a veteran of countless battles, stared intently, his eyes reflecting the intensity of the rush he faced alone. The hooded figure, realizing the gravity of the situation, knew he had to alert the commander about the mysterious him. He swiftly moved away from the door, his footsteps echoing in the desolate corridor. A lone figure in light tactical gear scrambled across a crumbling floor, a monstrous, metal-limbed creature looming above him. He realized with a jolt of fear that his hiding place had been compromised. The white-haired man, amidst a blur of motion and a low growl, braced himself against the backdrop of a towering skyscraper adorned with ominous, shadowy tendrils. A sinister figure, draped in dark robes and with wild white hair, unleashed a chilling command to his servants, his voice laced with a terrifying glee, ordering them to kill everyone. The scarred, white-haired warrior regarded something unseen with a chilling blend of intensity and grim determination. A soldier, face grim and scarred, passionately pleaded with the powerful hunter, his words laced with desperation and hope, convinced that the hunter's strength could save countless lives. A soldier, recognizing the man he'd aided before, urgently warned him about the impending bombing of the area. The jeep careened wildly, its driver cursing as something jammed, preventing escape. A tense silence descended, broken only by the grinding of gears. Then, a jaw clenched in grim determination, with the thought that to hunt an enemy, you must start with their leader. A figure in dark attire propelled themselves through the air, leaving a trail of motion lines, observed by a cloaked figure below. Driven by a grim necessity, the gray-haired man charged forward, the wind whipping around him, the words "to save many," kill quickly echoing in his mind. The hooded figure, eyes blazing with crimson fury, unleashed a devastating blow, his cloak billowing around him like a storm cloud. A colossal, dark shape slammed into the ground, sending debris flying as the white-haired figure braced for impact. The white-haired man's eyes glowed with an unnerving light as he realized the monstrous being had grown exponentially stronger, its power amplified by a sinister fusion with another man. Amidst a chaotic scene of destruction, the white-haired man stumbled, shielding his face from falling debris. The cloaked figure, wreathed in dark energy, lunged with an outstretched hand toward the fallen, gray-haired man, exclaiming in frustration at his tenacity. The long-haired figure, eyes blazing with intensity, reacted with a startled huh. He stared intently at someone, muttering, "This guy, the scarred man with white hair realized with a jolt. Looks just like me." A dark, crackling energy surged through a sinister blade, held aloft by a figure with stark white hair and a determined, yet shadowed, face, the power emanating from the weapon palpable. He marveled at the immense power coursing through the weapon. A close-up revealed a shadowed face, a single eye gleaming with a mixture of awe and apprehension, a gash visible on their cheek. The figure recognized a particular sword, a chilling premonition washing over them. The sword spelled trouble. Consumed by a furious rage, the cloaked figure, their single eye gleaming menacingly from beneath the shadows, swore death upon their unseen enemy, branding them the seed of the abyss. With a fierce grunt, the white-haired man braced against an unseen force, a dark, jagged shield materializing before him as if torn from the very fabric of reality, the word destiny echoing ominously. With a grim determination etched on his face, the white-haired man lunged forward, his fist ablur against the chaotic backdrop as a dark, swirling energy crackled around his arm. A fist, clad in dark fabric, connected with brutal force, sending shockwaves through the air. With a guttural cry, a dark, swirling energy erupted from one outstretched hand, aimed directly at the startled, white-haired figure. With a guttural cry and a surge of dark energy, the young man in the brown jacket brought his wickedly ornate sword down in a brutal arc. The silver-haired warrior's face, flecked with dark particles, contorted in a grimace of furious determination. The white-haired warrior questioned if what he had witnessed was merely a trick of his mind, his dark blade humming with an unsettling energy. He sensed a sudden, powerful surge of energy emanating from the ground around him. Amidst a swirling vortex of dark energy and sharp, crystalline shards, the white-haired man gripped a wickedly ornate, dark blade. His expression a mixture of awe and grim determination as he recognized the power he now wielded, the very essence of the abyss itself. A cloaked figure drifted against a stormy sky, trailed by wisps of dark energy. A voice boomed, laced with contempt, questioning if the only thing the silver-haired man was capable of was stealing someone else's weapon. A lone figure, sword drawn, stood defiant amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn cityscape as a monstrous hand, grotesquely large and shadowed, descended upon him with terrifying speed. As something vanished into thin air, the white-haired man, a faint scar marking his face, mused on the untapped potential of the abyssal power he wielded. Amidst a ravaged cityscape, the white-haired man in the dusty pink jacket realized the battle was far from over. His priorities shifted, ensuring the soldier's safety became paramount. Inside the vehicle, a soldier with a slightly bewildered expression was asked by an unseen figure if he was comfortable with heights, to which he quickly confirmed with a hesitant yes. The pilot, his face etched with shock and confusion, stammered a bewildered "ah" as he gripped the controls of his vehicle. With a grunt of exertion, the white-haired man heaved a large vehicle, his muscles straining as he realized they were airborne. With a furious roar, the long-haired warrior bellowed full, as dark energy crackled around him. He warned his opponent not to underestimate the immense power of the abyss. A cloaked figure, amidst a swirling vortex of dark energy, declared that strength isn't for safeguarding the weak. A swirling vortex of dark energy pulsed ominously amidst a ravaged cityscape, as a figure observed, their purpose driven by an insatiable hunger for ultimate power. A white-haired man, his jacket billowing around him, sprinted from the chaotic scene, his face etched with grim determination. A dark, swirling vortex of power erupted, consuming everything in its path as a voice boomed, condemning someone to die alongside a weaker human. The white-haired warrior, a fresh cut marking his cheek, observed his opponent's movements with a sharp, focused gaze, muttering about their surprising speed. Crouching by a dust-covered vehicle, The man realized that even escape on foot was futile. Whatever asterisk was, it would be faster. A grim determination hardened his features as he muttered, "In that case, the dot clearly preparing for a different course of action." Soaring above a ravaged cityscape, the determined figure vowed to crush the looming, ominous sphere hanging in the smoke-filled sky. With a surge of power, the man in the dark suit unleashed a forceful strike, a shimmering energy emanating from his hand. The white-haired figure spun, a dark, shadowy energy swirling around him as he questioned if his attack had landed. Disappointment washed over him as he realized his efforts were completely ineffective. The white-haired figure, amidst a chaotic scene of dark, swirling energy and crimson burst, realized with a jolt that they had found their target's true form. A sudden, pain cry escaped him as he was struck, his face contorted in a grimace. "Damn it," he cursed, realizing the gravity of the situation. Leaping through a debris-filled sky, the silver-haired man hurled a dark, crimson-ringed orb of energy towards a jeep careening below. The scarred, silver-haired man roared, ordering someone out of a vehicle with a menacing intensity. Inside, a terrified soldier in camouflage pleaded, begging the figure not to approach. A sinister darkness coiled around the soldier as the scarred man leaned in, his voice a chilling whisper, mocking the soldier's fear. A chilling glint sparked in the silver-haired warrior's eye, a silent promise of what was to come. With a determined "I'll carry you back home." A jeep flew through the air with a resounding crash. A dark, pulsating sphere of energy appeared, causing someone to curse in frustration as a jeep was violently thrown through the air by unseen, shadowy tendrils. As dark, menacing tendrils snaked towards a jeep, a cloaked figure loomed above, their voice laced with a dangerous curiosity about their target's anger. A calm voice responded from within the vehicle, advising against excessive agitation. The white-haired man braced himself, dark energy crackling around his fist. A voice cried out in alarm, pointing to the riddled soldier, still twitching amidst the encroaching darkness. He yet lived. A chilling figure, wreathed in dark energy and bearing a skeletal grin, fixated its gaze on someone, a sinister amusement in its hollow eyes as maniacal laughter filled the air. A cloaked figure ominously declared the cruel fate awaiting someone, to witness the death of everyone they held dear. A jeep tumbled through the air, amidst swirling chaos, described as a beautiful fate by the cloaked one. The white-haired man, seemingly unaffected, strode forward amidst the destruction. The man with piercing gaze and a scar on his face remained silent, his expression unreadable, a storm brewing within. A menacing figure loomed, a chilling question hanging in the air. Gripped by a dark glee, the larger man held the smaller one close, his words a cruel taunt about finding pleasure in crushing others. With a sinister chuckle, double quotes closing parenthesis, the cloaked figure unleashed a dark, spiky energy from their outstretched hand. As shards of obsidian rained down, a figure in light-colored robes, seemingly unfazed by the obvious danger of the obsidian storm, scoffed at the need for explanation. A barrage of sharp, gleaming projectiles sliced through the air, aimed squarely at the white-haired man's back. He stumbled forward, blood welling up around the embedded shards, a grimace of pain and defiance twisting his features. "Is that so?" he muttered, the question hanging heavy with an undercurrent of grim acceptance. A powerful blast erupted from below, sending the jeep carrying the cloaked figure and his armored companion hurtling through the air amidst a shower of debris and energy. With a snarl of "Scum, like you double quotes, the powerful figure unleashed a devastating blow, sending the jeep tumbling through the air in a chaotic spin. Its occupants tossed about like ragdolls amidst the ravaged cityscape. Disgusted and enraged, the white-haired man, his face marked with fresh wounds, spat out the words "make me sick." As he lunged forward, fist clenched. With a powerful kick, he launched himself off a speeding vehicle, the force of the impact sending tremors through the air. The white-haired man's face hardened with determination. A soldier, flung through the air, landed heavily atop a speeding jeep amidst a rain of debris and the echoes of destruction. A chilling grin spread across the soldier's face, his eyes glowing red with a menacing aura as dark tendrils snaked around him, his gaze fixed on a terrified comrade. The white-haired warrior, amidst a flurry of motion and crackling energy, recoiled from a blow, a red thread snapping taut around him. His face, caught in a grimace of exertion, softened with a sudden, somber regret as he muttered an apology. A furious figure lunged from a vehicle, accusing another man of being dragged into the chaos. Across the desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, a cloaked figure stood defiant, their back to the white-haired man whose intense gaze, marked by a facial scar, hinted at a brewing confrontation. Having analyzed the red shirt Manhwa, the specific scene depicts a fierce battle amidst a devastated cityscape. The white-haired protagonist, clad in his tattered red coat, lunges downwards with a powerful, determined strike towards a cloaked figure below. With a dismissive scoff, the white-haired man delivered a crushing blow, sending his opponent spiraling downwards into the dust, his attack deemed useless. A cloaked figure, radiating menacing power, loomed over a white-haired young man, their words dripping with disdain for the rookie's inability to wield the power of the abyss. The young man, battered but defiant, stared back, his eyes burning with a fierce determination that hinted at a hidden strength. He braced himself, seemingly unfazed by his wounds, as if preparing to unleash a surprising counterattack. With a wild grin and a glint of madness in his eyes, the silver-haired warrior roared a challenge. "Defeat me." As a powerful blow landed, sending a spray of blood through the air. Based on the provided image from Red Shirt, and assuming prior context of the man was plot, the following can be inferred. A whirlwind of motion erupted as the cloaked figure, their face a mask of grim determination, unleashed a devastating attack, sending debris flying and their opponent reeling. The ravaged cityscape bore witness to the ferocity of the blow, as the ground trembled under the impact. With a brutal sneer, and the words "you're no match" hanging in the air, the white-haired man delivered a devastating blow, his fist connecting with a sickening thud. A shadowy figure grasped a pipe, the red glow highlighting a tense anticipation of the coming clash. A cloaked figure, immense and shrouded in shadow, descended with terrifying speed, leaving the white-haired man in a burgundy suit speechless amidst the ravaged landscape, the word impossible barely escaping his lips. Amidst the debris and dust, the cloaked figure with stark white hair touched his cheek in disbelief, a twisted grin forming on his face as he registered the unexpected pain. With a fierce scoff, the white-haired man lunged forward, his attack a blur of motion punctuated by the words "people grow, you idiot," directed at his unseen opponent, blood splattering in the air. A surge of dread washed over the silver-haired figure, his eyes widening with the chilling realization of imminent danger. As if struck by an unseen force, the cloaked figure hurtled through the air, a stark silhouette against the blurred backdrop. The silver-haired warrior roared in disbelief, realizing his opponent had instantly mastered the power of the abyss just by observing him. His gaze darted around frantically, searching for the vanished figure amidst the swirling chaos and splatters of dark energy. With a guttural cry and a flash of violet light in his eyes, the spiky-haired man lunged forward, a tattered cloak swirling around him. The long, silver-haired figure below reacted with startled alarm, eyes widening at the sudden attack. A dark-clad figure propelled himself through the air with incredible speed, leaving trails of motion blur in his wake as he streaked towards his opponent. The hooded figure below braced for the impact, his tattered cloak billowing around him as he admitted his foe was more formidable than anticipated. The white-haired man, a chilling glint in his eye, taunted his unseen opponent, suggesting they might have escaped his initial attack. He unleashed a devastating, dark, crackling energy attack, daring them to evade this new threat. "There is no image provided. Please provide the image so I can fulfill your request." With a thunderous roar, a colossal figure was cleaved in two, sending shockwaves through the crumbling cityscape below. A dark, swirling energy pulsed around a small, struggling figure, almost consuming them in its shadowy embrace. As the figure braced against the onslaught, a single glowing eye materialized within the darkness, observing. Recognizing the familiar technique being used against him, he grimly resolved to adjust his strategy. With a fierce cry, the white-haired man declared he'd found the real body's core, dark tendrils swirling around him. His hands, crackling with energy, tightened their grip on an unseen force. The force resisted, pulling back against his power, but he strained, pushing his power to the limit. A figure, clad in a dark, tattered uniform, was flung into the air, entangled by sinuous, crimson tendrils that pulsed with menacing energy. A monstrous, shadowed form loomed below, its single visible eye burning with malevolent intent, and a chilling command, "Get crushed," echoed through the ravaged landscape. The white-haired warrior, suspended in midair amidst a surging mass of dark, pulsating tendrils, uttered a disbelieving "no way da," double quotes as the monstrous, shadowy figure loomed above him, its single visible eye glowing with menacing intent. Under a blazing sun, a catastrophic explosion rocked the heavens, sending debris hurtling through the air. Dark, swirling tendrils of energy crackled with an ominous glow, consuming what remained of the shattered landscape. The ground continued to erupt in fiery bursts, the aftershocks rippling outward like a destructive wave. Smaller explosions followed, marking the final, devastating blows. Amidst a chaotic explosion of fire and debris, a figure clad in a dark suit and light shirt plummeted from a great height. A surge of power crackled around him, his eyes blazing with violet energy as he uttered a single, charged word, "You're." Amidst a ravaged landscape, a figure in dark attire lunged forward, a challenge hurled towards the cloaked figure standing before him. The cloaked figure remained still, an ellipsis of silence hanging heavy in the air, hinting at a brewing storm of power. Enraged and determined, the gray-haired figure, amidst swirling crimson energy, vowed revenge as he unleashed a powerful technique, Shadow Unity. A skeletal warrior, wreathed in dark energy, lunged at a hulking beast. The beast roared, its jagged teeth bared in a furious snarl as crimson energy pulsed around it. Wounded and enraged, the monstrous figure, now with leathery wings unfurled, unleashed a raw, guttural cry, blood splattering the air. Amidst a swirling vortex of dark energy, a lone figure, clad in black, stood defiant against a horde of grotesque, winged creatures descending from the ravaged skies. A crimson aura pulsed around the figure, a beacon of power against the monstrous onslaught as spectral tendrils lashed out, tearing through the creatures. The air crackled with the intensity of the battle, the very ground trembling beneath the force of the unleashed energy. A lone figure lay amidst a shattered landscape, enveloped by swirling crimson energy. Bracing himself against a fierce, crimson-hued wind, the white-haired man pushed forward with grim determination. The white-haired warrior's single visible eye glowed with an unnerving violet light, his face obscured by swirling, smoky tendrils of power. Amidst the swirling dust and debris of a ravaged cityscape, the silver-haired figure stood silently, a single thought bubble, hanging heavy with unspoken words. The white-haired warrior stared in disbelief, questioning how his opponent could use such a simple technique to make an escape. With a frustrated grunt, the figure strode across the debris-strewn ground, lamenting their ruined clothes. The soldier, buried in the dirt and debris, gasped for air, his eyes wide with terror as the sounds of battle raged around him. Amidst the debris of a ruined cityscape, the silver-haired man, his grip tightening on a dark object, declared his intent to bring someone back with him. Tension hung thick in the air as the white-haired man, eyes narrowed, suspected the shadow manipulator wasn't finished. His unease intensified with the chilling realization that the absorbed shadows could unleash an attack at any moment. A sinister figure, draped in dark robes, reveled in the torment of another, his cruel smile a stark contrast to the agony he described, the unbearable pain of witnessing loved ones perish. The perspective shifted, zooming in on the victim, a scarred man with glowing eyes, radiating an aura of contained fury and impending vengeance, silently promising retribution. A cloaked figure floated amidst shadowy spikes, deemed a seed of the abyss, their fate considered beautiful by an unseen observer. Below, a scarred, white-haired man clutched a necklace, determined to stop the cloaked figure from reaching the evacuation shelter first. Analyzing the Manhwa red shirt, I can make the following assumption about this particular scene. The white-haired warrior, battered and scarred, propelled himself forward with fierce determination, knowing he had to reach his destination with utmost haste. Amidst the crumbling ruins of a devastated city, a sleek, futuristic drone lay deactivated, seemingly abandoned as streaks of light energy crackled through the sky. A drone zipped through the ravaged cityscape, its rotors ablur against the crumbling buildings. Amidst a desolate, rocky landscape, a stern-faced blonde woman in a military uniform directed a drone squad to meticulously sweep the area, leaving no stone unturned. Her gaze held a sharp intensity as she ordered the remaining units to maintain high alert, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. Amidst the crumbling ruins of a shattered cityscape, a lone figure in a sleek, light suit scaled a treacherous pile of debris, her movements precise and agile, while a small group of heavily armed soldiers cautiously navigated the wreckage below. A military officer, his face pale with a sheen of sweat, gripped his datapad, his eyes wide with alarm as he received the chilling news that the monsters had already breached their defenses. Amidst a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, the blonde woman stood tall and imposing, her back to the helmeted figure, a quiet I know hanging heavy in the dust-filled air. The blonde-haired officer stared in horrified disbelief, a single bead of sweat trickling down her face as she realized with dawning horror, they've all died. Amidst the ravaged cityscape, colossal, monstrous figures lay defeated, their hulking forms scattered across the debris-strewn ground, a testament to a fierce battle. Amidst a backdrop of devastation, a stern-faced woman in military garb barked orders to check drone data and report any information, her urgency underscored by the destruction surrounding them. A soldier, clutching a datapad, affirmed his obedience with a sharp "yes, ma'am," as he hurried to comply with the urgent command. Amidst a desolate, bombed-out landscape, clear signs of a fierce battle lay scattered. The blonde woman, observing the devastation with a mixture of awe and disbelief, learned of Lieutenant Kagura's astonishing feat. Not only had he survived the bombing, but he'd also single-handedly annihilated the entire monster horde. A massive, shadowy figure, presumably one of the slain monsters, lay draped over the rubble, emphasizing the sheer scale of the lieutenant's power. Across a desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, a lone figure called out to their director, their voice echoing amidst the ruins as a blonde-haired individual observed the scene with a serious expression. Relieved, the man confirmed the SD card on the downed drone was intact. With a determined glint in his eyes, he prepared to access the crucial data. A woman in a sleek, dark uniform stood with a soldier amidst a desolate, debris-strewn landscape, a small drone lying nearby. With a serious expression, she held a datapad, seemingly preparing to analyze the situation. She decided to investigate the scene further. Private First Class Matsuura bravely charged into the bombing zone, his figure a blur against the chaotic backdrop. Beside him, a mysterious figure in dark clothing moved with unnerving calm, their identity arousing suspicion and awe. The observer, captivated by the scene unfolding on their screen, recognized the second figure as the formidable hunter. Amidst a desolate, war-torn cityscape, soldiers cautiously navigated the debris-strewn streets. A strange, violet energy crackled and pulsed around one of the soldiers, his face etched with awe as he recognized the otherworldly phenomenon. Amidst a haze of magical energy, a special potion promised a permanent boost to its drinker's power. Nearby, an ancient royal dagger, sharp and gleaming, pulsed with the rank energy. Finally, a mysterious, ornate box, shimmering with an unknown aura, defied identification, its secrets locked within. A soldier, face etched with suspicion, barked a demand at his comrade from above. The other soldier, scrambling below, quickly denied finding anything, clutching a small, glinting box. His superior roared in disbelief, accusing him of a lie. Amid swirling dust and debris, a helmeted soldier, clutching a box, stared in disbelief, shouting "You!" at a fallen figure with long, light hair. The soldier, his face scarred and a cunning glint in his eye, examined the gleaming, ornate box, wondering if it contained the spoils of the recently defeated rush boss. The ominous warning hung in the air. Stealing from the unit was a punishable offense. A helmeted figure, face shadowed but eyes gleaming with a dark intensity, offered a chilling reminder of the consequences. The soldier, clutching a golden, ornately decorated box, stared upwards with a look of dawning realization, a silent thought hanging heavy in the air. The soldier, his face grim and a bandage across his nose, fiercely questioned how they were going to divide the spoils. With a sly grin, the man in the futuristic combat gear, reassured by a calming voice from somewhere off-panel, fixated on the ornate golden chest, his desire palpable. This treasure, and nothing else, was his sole objective. Eyes wide with disbelief, the soldier clutched the ornate, golden box, convinced it held something extraordinary. The tension crackled as one soldier, his face partially hidden by his helmet, warned another not to misinterpret the situation. The other soldier, blonde hair escaping his own helmet, leaned in menacingly, his grim expression and sharp words leaving the younger soldier with no options. A soldier, his face smeared with dirt but a sinister grin playing on his lips, clutched a mysterious golden box, a low chuckle escaping him as another soldier walked past in the ravaged landscape. With a sinister gleam in his eyes, the helmeted figure clutched the golden, intricately etched box, a triumphant whisper escaping his lips, a golem relic, finally his. Having finally reached Evacuation Shelter 6, the silver-haired protagonist surveyed the ravaged cityscape, his expression grim but determined. High above the city, watchful soldiers stood guard, a sense of anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Below, a diverse group moved through the streets, seemingly unaware of the looming threat, their journey accompanied by a large truck and a smaller, covered vehicle. A thought bubble appeared, revealing a sense of unease and the realization that an attack had not yet commenced. The rugged man watched with a furrowed brow as a procession of cloaked figures, one with a distinctive helm, filed past the lavender-haired individual, a silent question mark hanging in the air. The scarred, white-haired warrior emerged from the shadows, his imposing physique drawing gasps of shock and awe from the surrounding crowd. The silver-haired warrior, eyes narrowed, sensed an unnerving absence, realizing his adversary was nowhere near. A sudden shift in his demeanor, accompanied by a pregnant hinted at a chilling revelation. The white-haired man, a faint scar etched on his cheek, sensed an unnerving absence of power in the air. He realized with grim certainty that without a protector, this place was doomed. The scarred warrior stood silently, his back a canvas of past battles, as the cloaked figure, their face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, loomed over him. The silver-haired man, a fresh cut marking his cheek, stared intensely, a silent question hanging in the air about someone's obliviousness. Then a voice, laced with suspicion, remarked on the unusual thickness of the man's blood, implying he was not from around there. A blindfolded figure offered a chillingly confident smirk. The white-haired man glared, his face tense with grim affirmation. With a knowing chuckle and a subtle gesture, the blindfolded man expressed his relief at a newfound understanding. The scarred, white-haired man calmly pulled out a wad of cash, assuring his audience of his peaceful intentions while offering to purchase information about the outside world. The blindfolded man, clutching a rolled-up scroll, offered a chillingly sweet deal, hinting that the information it held would be invaluable to someone. The scarred man, examining a rolled-up wad of something, wondered aloud if it was the local currency. He confirmed with a curt nod that he was familiar with it. The cloaked figure, hearing reassuring words, expressed relief but hinted at a significant prerequisite. The blindfolded man, his face stoic and shadowed, declared he had a question. The blindfolded man reacted with stunned disbelief as the monk addressed him with an unexpected title of Your Excellency. The man in the wide-brimmed hat laughed, admitting his disguise had been seen through. Then, with a wink, he downplayed his attire as a mere pastime. The silver-haired individual, with a cryptic air, questioned if concealing one's eyes truly made a difference. A hearty laugh echoed, followed by a thoughtful pause from the blindfolded man, who adjusted his headwear with a mischievous grin, musing about the troublesome nature of someone unseen. Tears welled up as the bandaged figure confessed to a recent affliction, a troubling eye disease. A shadowed figure, eyes glowing ominously, loomed, radiating a palpable sense of dread that a scarred young man below could feel despite the obscuring darkness. He realized with a chilling certainty that the light emanating from the shrouded figure was profoundly terrifying. Observing the gray-haired man's composed facade, someone mused that he must have a secret motive for keeping his true abilities hidden. A chilling suspicion arose that a dangerous individual was masquerading among the seemingly harmless residents of the shelter. The scarred, shirtless man offered a question, his tone hinting at a shift in power dynamics. The figure in the wide-brimmed hat, previously silent, realized his moment had come, a subtle anticipation creeping into his posture. Blindfolded and seemingly confined, the man gestured, demanding to know what was happening beyond the walls. A worried voice informed him that armed soldiers were gathering outside. On a rooftop overlooking a sprawling cityscape, soldiers armed and ready stood guard by heavy artillery, the tense atmosphere suggesting imminent battle. Unseen by most, something disruptive was happening, hinted at by the narrator's observation. The white-haired warrior and his brawny companion, weapons strapped to their backs, moved with purpose, their expressions grim. A sudden awareness pierced the tension. The distinct sound of explosions echoed from beyond their immediate surroundings. The man in the wide-brimmed hat gestured outwards, his shadowed face giving nothing away as he asked what was happening beyond the confines of their current location. The white-haired young man, his face etched with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity, remained silent, absorbing the tension. While running an errand, a muscular, white-haired man was startled by a sudden blast from the southwest. So much so that he dropped his letter, and, in a moment of frantic improvisation, repurposed his shirt as a makeshift map, laughing at the absurdity of the situation. A startled gasp escaped the blindfolded man as a shocking realization dawned on him. His opponent was concealing their true strength. He exclaimed in disbelief, realizing they too had been hiding their power. Grateful for the directions to the southwest, the traveler expressed sincere thanks for the crucial help received. The scarred warrior humbly brushed off the gratitude. The scarred, white-haired man observed with a furrowed brow as the cloaked figure with the wide-brimmed hat ventured alone into the desolate, rubble-strewn landscape, his path seemingly aimless and perplexing. Someone pondered the rarity of fighters as powerful as the scarred, white-haired man standing before them, radiating an almost palpable aura of strength. The observer, slightly obscured but seemingly cloaked, admitted they were hesitant to cause a disturbance, acknowledging the potential consequences of challenging such a formidable figure. The scarred, white-haired man strode through the city streets, his mind racing with a mixture of suspicion and defiance as he questioned why he, a clearly suspicious individual, was being allowed to roam freely. The helmeted figure mused aloud that humanity's defenses might be lowered due to a shared enemy, his words echoing in the tense air as the scarred, white-haired man and others followed behind him. As the customer departed, a polite "please come again" echoed from the stylish storefront, the words hanging in the twilight air. Sporting a sharp new look, the white-haired man revealed he'd used the monk's money to upgrade his wardrobe. Beneath the looming shadows of a futuristic cityscape, a determined young man with stark white hair and a facial scar resolved to embark on a quest to find his parents. A white-haired man, shrouded in shadows, held a worn photograph, a family portrait, whispering to himself, "Let's start the old-fashioned way, . A hooded figure, their face partially obscured, softly uttered "excuse me," their hand gently touching their cloak. The scarred, silver-haired man presented a photograph of a family to the blonde woman beside him, his voice low and urgent as he asked if she recognized the couple. The blonde woman gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief at whatever she held in her trembling hands. The silver-haired man, back turned, denied any connection to the light-haired woman, waving him down from behind, his tone laced with a nervous urgency. The scarred, silver-haired man muttered, perplexed, as if recalling a woman's startled reaction to his presence. A tense question hung in the air, wondering if everyone present was on edge. The sharp retort of a shirtless, bandaged man cut through the silence, challenging the intense gaze of a silver-haired figure. The silver-haired man, seemingly unfazed, contemplated having to directly address the source of the tension. In a dimly lit alleyway, a tense confrontation brewed as a figure in a light shirt barked, "Hey, you." At the sharply dressed man with stark white hair. The white-haired man, a scar etched near his eye, leaned over a shadowy figure, his glowing purple eyes widening in apparent disbelief as he questioned the situation. Tension thickened the air as the scarred young man, his face contorted in a mixture of suspicion and anger, growled at the newcomer, accusing them of being out of place. The bandaged man, his face a mask of disbelief and exasperation, jabbed a finger accusingly, questioning someone's bizarre, antiquated courting method in the dead of night. The white-haired man, holding a photograph of a group of people, inquired if the curly-haired individual recognized the two figures captured in the image. The curly-haired person retorted with playful suspicion, accusing the other of suddenly flirting with everyone they encountered. The curly-haired man, bandages askew on his face, thrust a photograph forward, his expression a mixture of shock and accusation as he demanded to know why the other person possessed such a picture and if they knew the people in it. With the bandage across his cheek, the young man's face contorted with a fierce intensity as he demanded to know the other's connection to them. The silver-haired man, his face a mask of grim determination, declared his lineage with a quiet intensity, revealing a hidden connection. The white-haired man, a scar etched across his cheek, stared down with a mixture of shock and recognition at a small boy, who beamed back at him. The man stammered in disbelief, realizing he knew the child from somewhere. The man in the light green shirt, face contorted in a furious grimace, recoiled as if struck, demanding to know if he was being mocked. Tires screeched against the pavement as a heavy vehicle, likely a truck, accelerated sharply, leaving a trail of dust and debris in its wake. Amidst a blur of motion, the silver-haired man, his face etched with a grim determination, thrust a photograph at another, causing the recipient to recoil in stunned shock. A monstrous figure, bound and writhing, crashed down, sending debris flying as the white-haired man strode forward, seemingly unfazed by the chaos, while another, clad in green, was flung back by the sheer force of the impact. In a surge of adrenaline, the young man in the pale green shirt, face contorted in a fierce grimace, braced himself against an unseen force, shards of something shattering around him. The silver-haired man, radiating an aura of dangerous calm, feigned deafness, requesting the terrified driver, visible through the shattered car window, to repeat himself. The man with the band-aid on his nose stammered nervously, a manic grin spreading across his face as he clearly tried to fabricate a believable excuse. The wild-haired, bandaged man cackled with manic energy, pointing at a stunned figure in dark clothing who seemed to be caught completely off guard by this unexpected reunion. Someone offered vague directions down the road to the silver-haired man in the dark coat, gesturing with a pointed finger. With a brief thanks and a small wave, the silver-haired man in the dark coat strode away down the quiet street. The other man, watching his retreating form, raised his hand in a silent farewell, a soft take care escaping his lips. Amidst a somber cityscape, a high five hung in the air, charged with unspoken camaraderie between the eager young man with the bandaged nose and his approaching companion. Sensing impending doom, the man with the bandaged nose sprinted through the ravaged streets, his urgency palpable. He knew he needed to gather everyone, the gravity of the situation etched on his face. The white-haired man strode down a dimly lit street, the chilling realization that a thug knew his family's address weighing heavily on his mind. His pace quickened, a sudden memory surfacing, his father's inherent kindness towards everyone he encountered. Haunted by a memory, the protagonist darkly observed a cheerful family scene, a mother and a son's waving goodbye, reflecting on how their kindness made them vulnerable in a cruel world, much like his own mother had been. The silver-haired man, his jaw set with grim determination, declared his presence, a reassurance hanging in the chilling air. The silver-haired figure, draped in a dark coat, paused in the desolate alley, a sense of grim anticipation hanging in the air as he murmured that this must be the place. Beneath the twilight sky, a lone figure stood before an imposing gate, a question hanging heavy in the air. Did the two he sought reside within those walls? Observing the deserted street, the silver-haired man in the dark jacket mused that the depopulation must have left many houses vacant. A hand snapped its fingers, a spark of sound echoing in the otherwise quiet room. The white-haired young man, alerted by the noise, looked up, a flicker of recognition in his sharp eyes as he realized whose voice he was hearing. A smirk played on his lips as he realized it was his father. Under the dimly lit night sky, the white-haired man greeted the dark-haired figure with a sinister welcome home, his tone dripping with a chilling familiarity. A cunning glint flickered in the white-haired man's eyes as a question mark hung in the air above him, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. Startled, the man in the vest demanded to know the stranger's identity. The scarred man's face contorted in a grimace of strained recognition as he gasped, "It's me, dot dot dot." The sharply dressed man, his face a mask of disbelief, let out a confused grunt, seemingly taken aback by something the silver-haired man had just said or done. The white-haired man, Sora, revealed himself with a strained, almost manic grin, a single bead of sweat trickling down his temple. Stunned, the man with the streaked hair gaped, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple as he stammered in disbelief. A tense silence hung heavy in the air as the silver-haired man and his dark-haired companion sat opposite each other at a low table in a stark, minimalist room. A woman in traditional attire gracefully entered, a tray laden with teacups, apologizing for the delay as she approached the white-haired man who awaited her. Tension hung heavy in the air as one person inquired whether the other two, a woman in traditional garb and a sharp-dressed man, had yet spoken to each other. Another, cloaked and with silver hair, agreed with a sense of disbelief, noting how different their companion now seemed. The sharply dressed man declared with a confident smirk that they needed those, his words catching the attention of the dark-haired woman beside him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. The scarred, silver-haired man's lips curled into a knowing smirk as he questioned, "And what is those?" The sharply dressed man leaned in, a predatory glint in his eyes, suggesting a clandestine exchange of secrets with the white-haired young man before him. He mused darkly that while he wouldn't reveal himself to his wife, the youth would face consequences if he failed to provide the answers he sought. A shadowy figure received a chilling order: silence anyone who raises suspicion. A cloaked figure, their face obscured by shadow, received confirmation: a sharp Roger. Echoing in the dimly lit room, their gaze fixed intensely on two men seated at a table below. The white-haired man, a scar etched on his cheek, observed someone with a calculating gaze, realizing their continued suspicion. The dark-haired man, seemingly reassured by the stringent security, exhaled a sigh of relief and turned to the scarred, silver-haired man with a challenging question, his voice laced with anticipation. The silver-haired man, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, met the other's gaze, the silent promise of a thrilling endeavor hanging heavy in the air. The scarred man, a chilling smirk playing on his lips, offered a cryptic farewell to his henchman. He warned the man to brace himself, for the secrets he was about to reveal were dangerous and forbidden. Every weekend, the dark-haired woman sipped her tea calmly as the sharp-dressed man incredulously revealed a secret about the white-haired figure, who sat with his back turned, seemingly unaware of their conversation. The man's face contorted in disbelief, eyes widening as a chilling realization struck him. Someone knew his secret. A sharply dressed man, brandishing a knife and a tomato, loomed over a masked figure who stared back in stunned disbelief at the mention of the homemaker's support group. The scarred man, a smirk playing on his lips, revealed a shocking secret about the person he was addressing. They had been secretly attending ballet classes every week. A muscular man in a tutu struck a graceful ballet pose, radiating an unexpected elegance, while a masked figure, presumably witnessing the spectacle, seemed utterly bewildered, sweat beading on their brow. The sharply dressed man reacted with a startled exclamation, his eyes widening in surprise. The door creaked open, revealing a silver-haired man who entered the dimly lit room, where it figures a woman sipping from a teacup and a dark-haired man in a vest sat at a table, their postures stiff with a palpable tension. The older man, with a sly grin, conceded a point to the younger, scar-faced man, but with a barbed implication that the deduction was rather obvious. A sly grin spread across the scarred man's face as he offered to share a secret about his family. The man with dark, slick-back hair challenged someone with a skeptical smirk, questioning their supposed knowledge. With a chillingly confident "of course," the white-haired man, a scar etched across his cheek, issued a dark promise, his words laced with a menacing undertone. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Tension hung heavy in the air as the man, sweat beading on his brow, urged someone forward with a strained, almost sinister, "Go ahead." In a serene tea room, a tense meeting unfolded as the silver-haired man revealed that the Japanese sword on display was merely a replica. His words hanging heavy in the air between the other two, a woman in traditional attire and a sharply dressed man, both seemingly unfazed by the revelation, their attention fixed on the weapons before them. Hidden in the shadows, the masked figure's eyes widened in stunned realization, a replica. The dark-haired man, face contorted in disbelief, leaned in, demanding proof with a frantic urgency, sweat beading on his brow. The white-haired individual, partially obscured by the other's imposing figure, coolly countered with the same question, their voice a low murmur, challenging the accuser's outburst. The silver-haired man presented a sword, its hilt bearing a chilling secret, his brother's bite marks. Startled, the dark-haired man gasped, leaning forward in disbelief. As the men with swords lunged forward, a chilling tale of the family head's brutal past unfolded, shocking the masked listener with the recounting of a desperate act of defiance that left 38 dead. The white-haired man braced himself as a gleaming katana sliced the air, stopping just short of his neck in a chilling near miss. The cloaked figure scoffed, dismissing someone's boastful words as empty bravado, but his eyes narrowed, revealing a suspicion of a hidden agenda to ambush the family head when he least expected it. A blade extended ominously from a hand. It retracted just as quickly, a flicker of deadly intent, causing the white-haired man to remark on its surprising function. With a smirk playing on his lips, he tested the retractable blade himself, seemingly unconcerned about the dark-haired man and the frightened woman cowering behind a nearby table. The white-haired warrior, his face marred by a fresh scar, glared intensely at someone unseen, a venomous "you idiot," escaping his lips. Overwhelmed with shock and relief, a dark-haired figure clung to the white-haired man, exclaiming their disbelief at his unexpected return from what they assumed was death. Overcome with emotion, the dark-haired man wept, recognizing Sora and welcoming him home. The white-haired young man, scarred but resolute, held the older man close, a hint of painful understanding in his eyes, wishing his father knew the trials they had endured. The older man, his face etched with grief and shock, could only manage a choked whisper of "Dad," as the weight of the situation crashed down. The white-haired man, a scar etched across his cheek, confessed to the dark-haired figure cradled in his arms that his relentless search for information had unexpectedly propelled him to a position of power. The white-haired man watched with disdain as his boss, overcome with emotion, wept openly, a display he found pathetic. He then turned to his shadowy, masked figure, a silent question hanging in the air, and inquired whether they could overthrow the one who held power over them both. A blood-splattered man with glowing red eyes and a sinister grin loomed over a masked figure, his words painting a grim picture of a life steeped in violence. The masked individual, sweat beading on their brow, stared up in apprehension, seemingly trapped in the wake of the other man's menacing presence. The masked figure looked on in stunned silence, a single drop of sweat tracing a path down his cheek, as he confessed to never having witnessed such a scene. The white-haired man comforted the weeping man, holding him close, as the distraught man choked out that he'd never seen anything like this before. The masked figure gasped, sweat beading on his brow, horrified by the sight of the disgraced family head, a man known for his unwavering honor, now reduced to a pitiful state. Trapped and desperate, the masked figure sprawled on the wooden floor, pleading for their life. Gripping a dark object tightly, a figure seemingly materialized from the shadows, their action radiating raw power. A desperate plea, "Please wait," echoed from an unseen source, adding a layer of urgency to the tense situation. The white-haired young man, a cruel smirk playing on his lips, delivered a chilling message to the masked figure beneath him. His father desired a conversation. Under the pale moonlight, a traditional building loomed, hinting at the serious nature of the impending meeting. A tense silence hung in the air as the four individuals sat around a low table in a sparsely furnished room. A stern figure addressed Ochiai, his guard, with a thinly veiled reprimand about his loose tongue and tendency to gossip. A sinister grin spread across the scarred man's face as a dangerous thought crossed his mind, contemplating the potential chaos if a certain secret were to be revealed. The dark-haired man, a smirk playing on his lips, shifted the burden of responsibility to the others with a curt, challenging phrase. The white-haired man beside him met the challenge with a predatory grin, while the cloaked figure bowed their head, seemingly accepting the weight of the implied task. The masked figure, sweat beading on his brow, swore a vow of silence. To figures, their faces shadowed and eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity, loomed over a third, their expressions mirroring a sinister shared secret. A nervous sweat beaded on the forehead of the man below, clearly intimidated by the predatory gazes of the pair, as an unseen observer confirmed their undeniable familial resemblance. Sipping her tea, the dark-haired woman in flowing robes calmly warned the cloaked figure against threatening someone. The hooded figure, eyes wide with a mix of awe and nervousness, stammered out a respectful "ma'am," clearly starstruck. A sly grin spread across the dark-haired individual's face as they issued a warning, emphasizing the absolute necessity of silence. With a stiff bow and a muffled "yes'm," the cloaked figure acknowledged the unseen authority in the room. The woman in the traditional robe sighed in relief, grateful that a certain someone hadn't revealed her less than glamorous sleeping habits. A sharply dressed man, however, pointedly brought up the very subject she was celebrating the omission of, much to her chagrin and the silent amusement of the silver-haired individual across the table. The scarred, silver-haired man emerged, a grim satisfaction playing on his lips, feeling like he'd just clawed his way back from the depths of hell once more. Overlooking a tense scene, a dark-haired man leaned back, his posture suggesting a sense of authority, while a white-haired man sat with clasped hands, seemingly deep in thought. A woman with long, dark hair and a reddish top looked up, a poignant expression on her face as she realized, with a mix of relief and disbelief, that she was finally home. The silver-haired warrior, a scar etched across his cheek, narrowed his eyes, a spark of dangerous intent flashing within them. As tension thickened in the room, a figure burst in, urgently addressing the white-haired man as boss. A tense warning reached the bandaged young man in the light green jacket. A white-haired kid was looking for him, and judging by the menacing grins and weapons brandished by the surrounding figures, trouble was brewing. A tense standoff unfolded as a man in a light green shirt, flanked by a menacing group, spread his arms wide in a defiant gesture. A heavy silence filled the room where a silver-haired man sat at a table, his gaze fixed, while a masked figure and a woman in a kimono observed him with an unsettling stillness. The white-haired young man, a faint scar tracing his cheek, turned his head slightly, a knowing smirk playing on his lips as he questioned if the overheard remark about a white-haired kid was directed at him. The white-haired young man watched with a knowing smirk as to others, one with a bandaged nose and the other sporting a gravity-defying hairstyle, reacted with a startled double quotes to something unseen, their expressions a mixture of surprise and apprehension. A wave of terror washed over the bandaged man as he recognized a familiar, dreaded presence, his eyes widening in disbelief and his mouth forming a silent scream. A bruised and battered young man, wielding a wooden staff, charged forward, a desperate glint in his eye, even as a voice taunted him about the sheer number of opponents he faced. The silver-haired man watched the charge with a cool, almost bored expression. Accusatory words were flung at the white-haired man, a pointed finger emphasizing the suspicion that he was about to harm their boss and possibly affiliated with the notorious Tiger's Roar. With a furious yell, the man in the light green shirt lashed out, aiming a kick at the silver-haired man who deftly caught his leg, a tense standoff hanging in the air. The white-haired man loomed over a shadowy figure, his glowing purple eyes fixed with an intense, almost predatory stare as a strange crackling sound filled the air. The scarred young man, with an air of casual dominance, smirked at his father, suggesting an introduction to the assembled men. A man, sharply dressed in a suit, announced with a mixture of pride and relief the return of his son, Sora, after 5 long years of absence, while a dark-haired woman beside him subtly smiled, cradling a warm mug. The man with the streaked hair savored his drink, a knowing smirk playing on his lips as he contemplated someone's power level. Panic seized the suited man, his face contorted in disbelief as he grappled with the unknown level of his opponent. A second man, also formally dressed but sporting a noticeable streak of white in his hair and a small goatee, watched with a knowing smirk, about to reveal the shocking truth. The white-haired man, his face bearing the marks of a recent fight, flatly declared he didn't have the system, stunning his onlookers into shocked exclamations. The man with the open gray jacket expressed incredulity that someone had survived 5 years in the Fallen Zones without relying on the system. With a wild look in his eyes and bandages plastered across his face, the dark-haired young man confronted another, his voice laced with a dangerous edge as he questioned what happens to those without the system. The scarred, white-haired man offered a cryptic smirk, unfazed by the taunt that no amount of training could push him past level 10. Incredulity filled the air as one man, sporting a bandage on his face, challenged another's assessment of a third party. Revealing a hidden truth, the supposed powerhouse was nothing more than a novice lacking the crucial advantage of the system. With a nervous laugh and sweat beading on his brow, the bandaged young man quickly dismissed his previous suspicion, feigning a sudden realization of his mistake. The man with the bandaged face watched his white-haired opponent with narrowed eyes, perplexed by his resilience after taking a seemingly devastating blow. The scarred, silver-haired man stood tall and imposing, a silent tension radiating from him as he seemed to consider something deeply. A challenging glint sparked in the silver-haired man's eyes as he issued a provocative invitation to test his power level. The young man with the bandaged nose and voluminous hair reacted with a quizzical huh, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. The scarred man confirmed something with a curt nod, as the dark-haired man beside him, a bandage on his nose, gave a knowing smirk. The scarred man continued, stating with an air of condescension that his companion's lack of the system meant he was clearly missing crucial information. A chibi-style character, seemingly a fighter judging by his stance, was revealed to be level 45, facing off against a multi-limbed monster. The scene shifted to a young man with a band-aid on his face, excitedly explaining that the system allows users to see monster levels. A small, determined figure, seemingly a newcomer judging by the LV0 floating beside him, faced a silver-haired individual exuding an air of cool confidence. The bandaged man enthusiastically explained that seeing others' levels requires a rare inspect skill, not possessed by many hunters. Under the watchful gaze of a full moon, a tense meeting unfolded, the sharp-featured man looming over the assembled group. He addressed the others, his words seemingly carrying weight and authority, as a woman in traditional attire stood calmly, a subtle smile playing on her lips. A man with darker hair, seated beside her, listened intently, a finger raised as if making a point. The scarred young man, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, prompted his mother to investigate something, a hint of urgency in his voice. The dark-haired woman confessed a deep desire to be by someone's side, a yearning that went beyond mere companionship. Her slight smile and knowing gaze hinted that she already possessed some secret knowledge about the situation. In a dimly lit room, a tense meeting unfolded as a man in a suit presented a glowing blue shard, eliciting shocked murmurs from the assembled group. The silver-haired man, cool and composed, was the subject of some sort of futuristic scan, the word system hovering in the digital display. A dark-haired man, his face etched with a mixture of frustration and disbelief, watched the results, muttering about the unchanging, predictable outcome despite repeated attempts. Frustration flickered across the dark-haired man's face as he stared at the glowing system display, baffled by the lack of information, while the silver-haired figure beside him remained impassive. The man, his face etched with intensity, considered two possible explanations. He grimly concluded that perhaps Sora lacked a system, whatever that might be, causing the current predicament. The young man with the bandaged nose realized with the start that his opponent's power level was either undetectable or simply far beyond his own comprehension. Sora Mukajima, a young man in a simple white tee and shorts, materialized in a digitized space, his form flickering with static as a sharply dressed older man observed him with a furrowed brow, realizing he could still perceive Sora's name even without the system active. The scarred man, Sora, stood stoically, his 5 years of solitary survival a testament to his resilience, a fact observed by the woman in traditional garb. She mused that such a feat would have been impossible for a novice, her tone hinting at both respect and concern. Bewildered, the scarred man realized Sora's power level was unreadable, a mystery he couldn't comprehend. He demanded to know what Sora had been doing for the past 5 years, a question laced with suspicion and awe. The dark-haired woman, a slight smile playing on her lips, turned to her companion, suggesting they should be happy despite the circumstances. A woman with dark hair and a knowing smile mused about Sora's strength. Touching his cheek, where a fresh scar was barely visible, the white-haired man met the gaze of the dark-haired woman who observed him with a mix of concern and relief, murmuring about the hardships he must have endured. Overwhelmed with emotion, the scarred young man gently touched his face, whispering "Mom." Double quotes, as if seeking comfort and strength. Haunted by fragmented memories of brutal battles and fallen comrades, the white-haired man touched his scarred face, the weight of past trauma evident in his somber expression. He recalled the desperate struggle against overwhelming odds, the clang of chains and the cries of pain echoing in his mind. The image of a silver-haired warrior, bloodied and defiant, flashed before him, fueling his quiet grief and fueling a smoldering resolve. A single tear escaped the silver-haired man's eye, reflecting a flicker of crimson light. The white-haired young man, tears streaming down his face, held the dark-haired woman close, a faint smile playing on his lips as he reassured her that everything was all right. She, nestled against him, choked back sobs, whispering her return to her mother. Overcome with emotion, the dark-haired individual wept openly, a soft plea of "please don't cry" echoing around them. A lone tear traced a path down the man's face, a stark contrast against his composed expression. He addressed a group of people, his voice laced with an unspecified purpose. As the group dispersed, a man in a dark suit guided another, larger individual, while a white-haired figure comforted a woman draped in pink. A masked figure observed the scene quietly from a nearby seat. A tense figure ordered someone away, his words sharp and urgent as he emphasized the long-awaited reunion of a mother and child. The dark-haired man, seen from the back, snapped his fingers, a sharp sound cutting through the quiet brightness of the room. A sharply dressed man with a streak of white in his dark hair expressed concern about Jiro and the others, who were 2 hours overdue. Under the pale glow of a crescent moon, a silent forest hinted at the mystery of their absence. Seated at a low table, the white-haired man suddenly remembered something and inquired about his brother, a note of concern in his voice directed towards the elegant woman across from him, presumably his mother. A bead of sweat trickled down the white-haired man's face as a dreadful premonition gripped him, a silent plea escaping his lips, "Don't tell me." The dark-haired woman, clad in a light top and darker sash, scrolled through her phone, reassuring the white-haired person beside her that someone was safe and sound, though rarely home due to military service. Someone held a phone, displaying a picture of a stern-faced soldier in camouflage. They offered to call the soldier, explaining that he'd been relentlessly fighting on the front lines, driven by a fierce desire to avenge the person they were speaking to. A wave of recognition and something akin to longing washed over the silver-haired man as he saw a familiar face he hadn't seen in a very long time. The silver-haired young man, his expression a mixture of curiosity and seriousness, inquired about his mother's position within the organization. A smug smile played on the dark-haired individual's lips as they declared their elevated status. The robed figure, radiating an aura of power, revealed the source of their authority, the sacred calling of a cleric. The cloaked individual, with a knowing smile, affirmed their role as a healer, possessing a vast repertoire of abilities that extended beyond mere mending, hinting at prophecy and potent support. The scarred, silver-haired man leaned in, his expression a mix of urgency and apprehension, as he asked the cleric if they could discern what was happening to him. The dark-haired woman calmly denied possessing the ability to see skills, a slight smile playing on her lips as she looked at the white-haired man beside her. He, leaning in with an intense gaze, questioned how she could have known what he was about to do. With a knowing touch to his scarred cheek, the dark-clad figure reminded him of the cleric's prophetic abilities. A woman with dark hair, beaming, joyfully declared she knew he would return, her words a mix of triumph and relief, as a tear escaped the eye of the gray-haired man she held close. Under a bright, full moon, the traditional rooftop of a building stood silhouetted against the night sky, a faint urban glow hinting at a bustling city below. A creaking sound alerted someone inside, and a sharp-suited, sunglasses-clad figure peered cautiously from behind a doorway, wondering who dared disturb the tranquility. A surprised murmur escaped his lips as he noticed something unexpected. The scarred, grizzled man looked up in shock as shadowy figures appeared, calling out a title that hinted at a dangerous hierarchy. Jiroi Washami, the vice president of the United Guilds, was greeted with enthusiastic cheers of welcome back. As he stepped into a grand entrance hall, his imposing figure and scarred face radiating power. He paused, his gaze intense and unreadable, while a sharply dressed figure in sunglasses, likely his bodyguard, stood silently by. Intrigued, the dark-haired man with a streak of white in his hair hummed, a sly grin spreading across his face as he questioned the reason for someone's apparent gloom. The scarred man, a striking figure with a crescent moon tattooed on his chest, leaned in, his gaze intense as he demanded answers from his subordinate about a clandestine investigation he'd ordered. The scarred man's suspicions were confirmed. Tiger's Roar was indeed connected to the army, a revelation that darkened his already intense gaze. As usual, they delivered the monster carcasses to the army, but a meticulous inspector with a notebook began to find fault with their delivery. The inspector, with a smug look, declared the carcasses too damaged to be accepted. Slyly, he offered them half the usual points while reporting the full amount to his superiors, pocketing the difference. Upon checking, all discrepancies pointed towards the Tiger's Roar gang. The sharply dressed man with the distinctive streak of white in his hair reacted with a mixture of surprise and understanding to the news he'd just received. The dark-haired man pondered the implications of Tiger's Roar's unexpected actions, suspecting a hidden motive behind their supposed neutrality. He clenched his fist, determined to protect his town's future from being trampled upon by these mysterious forces. The bearded man, his expression a mix of concern and authority, urged the other, sharply dressed man to prioritize food and rest despite the pressing, unspoken circumstances. A sharply dressed man, a predatory grin playing on his lips, summoned a glowing, ethereal blade, promising to deal with the situation at Tiger's Roar later. But first, he had a more immediate problem to straighten out. The sharply dressed man, a katana hilt visible at his hip, declared with a fierce glint in his eyes that they needed to prove the United Guilds weren't fools. The scarred, white-haired man, his face etched with grim resolve, heard something and murmured, "Tiger's Roar, ha-dot-dot-dot." Empowered by a mysterious black shard, the white-haired man realized his abilities were amplified, his senses heightened to perceive even distant whispers. Seated with a concerned woman beside him, he processed this newfound power, a grim realization dawning upon him about Kagawa and the robber's connection to the ominous Tiger's Roar. The dark-haired woman questioned aloud if her father was truly going to negotiate with ***, a note of disbelief coloring her tone. The scarred, white-haired man beside her, his face etched with grim determination, seemed lost in thought, before quietly admitting his apprehension. The white-haired man slid open the shoshi screen, revealing a tense tableau, a hulking, bearded figure flanked by a sharply dressed companion, their expressions a mixture of grim determination and surprise. With a steely glint in his eye and a slight smirk playing on his lips, the scarred young man declared his unwavering intent to accompany his father. The curly-haired man, face scarred and determined, seemed ready to jump into the fray. Another, shrouded in shadow, realized this might be the perfect opportunity to witness the scarred man's full potential unleashed. The scarred warrior, a crescent moon pendant hanging against his broad chest, looked up in silent question, a flicker of surprise in his hardened gaze, while his companion, with shorter, slicked-back hair, mirrored his confusion. The scarred, silver-haired man, his gaze intense, questioned the identity of a newcomer, a subtle smirk playing on the lips of the dark-haired woman beside him. A man with a scar on his face introduced his son, Sora, who had been missing in the Fallen Zone for 5 years. Astonished, another man, dressed in a suit, reacted with disbelief and curiosity, questioning how Sora survived alone in the dangerous zone for so long and what level he had attained. The man with the distinctive streak of white in his dark hair uttered a name, Sora, a hint of something unreadable in his gaze. The scarred man, flanked by his white-haired companion and a cloaked figure, moved with purpose, the weight of the revelation that someone lacked the system hanging heavy in the air. The scarred man pondered the revelation that someone was just an ordinary person, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grim understanding. He warned of the harsh reality awaiting anyone without the system, predicting a swift and brutal demise outside its protection. While acknowledging the impressive stats and survival skills of the white-haired man, a somber warning echoed, without job skills, he'd become a liability in combat. The imposing, bearded man, likely a leader given the context, offered seemingly good news, yet suggested his recently returned, dark-haired subordinate sit this one out, sensing his exhaustion. Reluctantly agreeing with an unseen speaker, the dark-haired man, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple, gravely instructed Sora to stay home with his mother. The scarred, silver-haired man decided a house tour was in order, a subtle smirk playing on his lips as he glanced at his dark-haired companion. The scarred young man with white hair wondered if the others doubted his combat abilities, his gaze hardening with a flicker of resentment. He grimly accepted their likely perception of him as an ordinary human in a world of system users. Lost in thought, the white-haired young man realized he still didn't fully understand the shelter's situation. A chilling thought crossed his mind. If a monster truly existed as he suspected, he must conceal his abilities to protect his parents. A tense agreement hung in the air as the silver-haired youth uttered, "All right." The scarred man with the long, dark hair and crescent moon necklace seemed taken aback, a questioning "huh?" escaping his lips as the others around him reacted with wide-eyed surprise. Frustrated, the man with the headband lamented his missed opportunity to witness someone's powers. Suddenly, a command rang out, "Let's go." And the group of men, a mix of suited figures and those in more casual attire, surged forward with a resounding "yeah." Their expressions a mixture of grim determination and excitement. A figure loomed large, their polished shoe about to descend as a group of sharply dressed men stood in a brightly lit hallway, seemingly awaiting orders or anticipating an arrival. Drawing on the larger context of red shirt, the woman in traditional garb calmly reassured someone, gesturing toward the scarred, white-haired man walking beside her, explaining his apparent concern for the unseen person's well-being. Reassured by a friend that her beloved, after their long-awaited reunion, would never put her in harm's way again, the dark-haired woman listened, a wistful smile playing on her lips. The silver-haired man beside her, presumably the subject of their conversation, looked on with a serious expression, seemingly anticipating her response. A quiet, but dot escaped her lips, a hint of unspoken conflict hanging in the air. The dark-haired woman reassured the anxious, white-haired man, her words laced with confidence in the unseen strength of someone they both cared about. She leaned closer, revealing a secret her visions of the future always proved true, and this time they painted a picture of safety and survival for the absent figure. The white-haired young man, a small cut visible on his cheek, insisted he was no longer a child. His tone laced with a newfound seriousness as he addressed the dark-haired woman in traditional attire, who offered a placating fine. He grimly acknowledged his mother's prophetic abilities to foresee danger, but pointed out a crucial detail. The tiger's roar was linked to the military, implying a more complex situation than anticipated. The scarred young man, his silver hair framing a grim expression, realized his father's conflicts would only escalate. The white-haired man, his expression a mix of concern and suspicion, questioned the current state of the shelter and the strained relationship with the group known as Tiger's Roar. Ever since Judgment Day, a hunter guild formed by the Awakened joined forces with the military to manage the shelters. He then founded the United Guilds and began cooperating with the military at Evacuation Shelter 6, hoping to find someone. The dark-haired woman, surrounded by suited men in sunglasses, smiled subtly, her eyes closed as if savoring a private victory, while a man beside her looked on with a serious expression. The narrator revealed that the United Guild's immense power stemmed from one person's heartfelt promise to reunite lost families, a vow that resonated deeply with many. The narrator explained the division of labor between the United Guilds and the military in maintaining order and dealing with threats. The dark-clad figure, presumably a leader, stood with his back partially turned, listening to the narrator's explanation. Someone, likely observing the leader, noted his compassion for his people, highlighting his reluctance to send them into dangerous breaches. The white-haired man explained to his dark-haired companion how they had maintained peace for the last 4 years. Months ago, the formidable hunter guild Tiger's Roar, hailing from Evacuation Shelter 4, arrived to establish a new branch, a subtle tension rippling across the dark-haired individual's face as they contemplated the implications. A young man with long dark hair, dressed in light robes, spoke of an unending conflict that had plagued their people since a pivotal moment in their history. The scarred young man, his silver hair stark against his dark attire, pondered aloud why the military remained uninvolved. The scarred man listened grimly as the relentless growth of the enemy's power was confirmed, leaving the regular army helpless. Hope, however, lay with the formidable Tiger's Roar, a group whose overwhelming strength was now the army's last resort in clearing the towers. The scarred man stressed the importance of tower raiding intel, declaring it valuable for the military to dismiss. His companion, dark-haired and intense, listened with a look of shrewd understanding, the gravity of the situation reflected in their gaze. The scarred man continued, revealing a crucial detail. Tiger's Roar possessed an awakened individual chosen by the tower deity. Ezra, with a serious expression, listened as a formidable, gray-haired man, draped in dark furs, revealed a crucial secret. The true strength of the Tiger Roar clan lay not in their might, but in a mysterious individual chosen by a deity. The silver-haired man, a thin scar etched across his cheek, inquired about the tower deity, his voice laced with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. The dark-haired individual spoke with reverence, describing the lords of the towers as near divine in power. Their gaze intensified as they explained that passing the deity's trial would transform one into an Esra, granting them godlike abilities. Outside the imposing towers, they were revered as divine messengers. Within those very walls, they transformed into vigilant guardians. A powerful faction known as Tiger's Roar currently commanded the largest number of these enigmatic Esras. The dark-haired woman observed the map marked with ominous symbols, her expression grim as she realized the swift and brutal expansion of Tiger's Roar, fueled by the immense power each Esra wielded. The white-haired young man, a faint scar marking his cheek, listened impassively as the dark-haired woman beside him lamented their guild's inability to conquer even a single tower. Despite the local populace's affection for her father's leadership, she confessed their struggle, revealing they were the only guild in the Union lacking in Esra, a vital element for success. The scarred, silver-haired protagonist grimly assessed the situation, his words carrying the weight of the unfolding crisis. Things were looking dire. He pondered aloud, questioning the United Guild's Yakuza-like behavior despite their supposed popularity. The woman beside him, dressed in a traditional garment, reacted with a surprised huh. With a sly, almost knowing smirk, the dark-haired figure touched their chin, dismissing something as mere personal preference. The scarred man, his expression unreadable, watched as the dark-haired individual stifled a yawn, a low chuckle escaping their lips. The silver-haired man, his dark coat falling around him, dismissed some unspoken concern, his voice echoing with a cold indifference as the woman beside him in traditional garb looked on. With a gentle, almost teasing lilt in her voice, the woman in traditional garb urged the scarred, silver-haired man to go take a relaxing bath, sensing his weariness. From the doorway, a woman with dark hair offered to wash the scarred, white-haired man's back. Flustered and slightly embarrassed, he quickly declined, insisting he could manage on his own. In a sparsely furnished room, bathed in cool light, a silver-haired figure stood, a dark coat draped around him, a thoughtful silence hanging heavy in the air as an unseen observer remarked on his growth. The white-haired man, his face marked with a fresh scar, stared intensely ahead, a dark aura swirling around him. Within a shimmering, geometric space, a figure stood, back to the viewer, observing another, smaller figure fading away within a luminous circle, a quiet resignation in his thought. All right, she's gone ... The gravity of the situation dawned on the white-haired man, his thoughts heavy as he stared out a large window. Haunted by worry for his father, the white-haired man slid open a window, the glass whispering against the frame. The white-haired warrior, eyes blazing with intensity, propelled himself forward with a burst of speed, his hand outstretched as if reaching for something just out of grasp. Ignoring the advice to rest, the dark-suited figure launched himself from the window, a blurred streak against the backdrop of the city's towering skyscrapers, observed by a shadowy figure in the foreground. The dark-haired woman, clad in flowing robes, mused with a knowing smile that children could be quite a handful at times. Sora's father, Sakuya, led a group of Union Guild members, their expressions grim and determined, toward the Tiger's Roar Guild headquarters. Meanwhile, high above the city, a figure in a dark coat observed the cityscape bathed in darkness, save for a single point of light. He noted the stark contrast, finding the darkness advantageous for his undisclosed purpose. It made his target, whatever it was, easier to locate in the surrounding gloom. The white-haired man, a scar etched near his eye, fixed his gaze on a distant point, a grim determination hardening his features as he muttered, over there ... A sense of unease rippled through the crowd as one noticed something amiss. A wave of dizziness washed over someone amongst them, unsettling the tense atmosphere. The white-haired man, his face marked with a fresh wound, wiped a tear away, marveling at the newfound resilience granted by the abyssal fragments. A dark, swirling abyss opened, ominously labeled the seat of the abyss. The white-haired man, his face scarred, stared in grim recognition, clutching his jacket. A shadowy presence emerged from the abyss, declaring its intent to capture him. High above the city, the white-haired man stopped, a flicker of recognition, and perhaps apprehension, crossing his face as a familiar voice echoed from below. The scarred, silver-haired man narrowed his eyes, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face as he focused on the ghostly image of a hooded figure, unable to detect his presence. The scarred, white-haired man's face hardened as he realized with a curse that his target had been in Shelter 6 all along. A wave of dizziness washed over the silver-haired man, a grimace twisting his features as he clutched his head, a fresh cut visible on his cheek. A menacing voice echoed, vowing to stop the seed of the abyss from escaping. The cityscape blurred below, suggesting a rapid descent or flight. A single, ominous word again hung in the air, hinting at a cyclical, perhaps inevitable, confrontation. The white-haired warrior, his face streaked with blood and determination, recoiled, a dark premonition settling over him as a sinister voice whispered of his very soul being the target. The white-haired man declared his enemy marked, a spectral image of the grinning, light-haired adversary materializing behind him. Someone spotted the marked man, their voice filled with anticipation. With a surge of power, the white-haired man was violently thrown back, his dark coat billowing around him as he braced for impact. The white-haired man, his face etched with grim determination and streaked with what looked like digitized terrors, lunged forward, his hand outstretched as if grasping at something unseen, vowing to stop the escape of the seed of the abyss, convinced it was all a trick. A powerful declaration hung in the air. The white-haired man's soul had been marked. He stared, a mixture of defiance and confusion etched on his scarred face as faint glowing lines flickered around him. He wondered aloud, eyes narrowed, if this shimmering aura was the mark itself. A menacing voice echoed, vowing to stop the seed from escaping. The white-haired figure, face contorted in a furious snarl, radiated a palpable aura of threat. Startled by his sudden voice, the silver-haired figure in the dark coat looked up, caught mid-motion on the rooftop under the cloak of night. A challenging question hung in the air, demanding to know his purpose there at such a late hour. A burst of power erupted from the white-haired man, his curse echoing as unseen enemies took notice. He urgently barked a warning, pushing someone down as danger approached. A frustrated curse ripped through the air as a sharp, gleaming object hurtled through space, narrowly missing its target. A desperate command to hold it echoed in the tense atmosphere. Plunging through the air, the white-haired man realized with a start that the illusion had vanished. With a surge of power, the white-haired figure slammed his hand onto the gritty rooftop, unleashing a visible wave of energy that rippled outwards. The white-haired man, his expression a mixture of grim determination and barely contained rage, barred the path of his unseen foe, a seed of the abyss, vowing to prevent their escape. A flicker of recognition, tinged with dread, crossed his face as a distorted image of another, older man with similar white hair materialized momentarily before him, a haunting reminder of a past threat resurfaced. He muttered darkly, sensing the ominous return of something he had hoped to leave behind. Amidst a sudden burst of light, the white-haired protagonist stared intently, questioning if the ethereal glow had caused something to vanish. Perched atop a skyscraper under the watchful gaze of a full moon, the silver-haired protagonist decided to take a chance. Under the dim glow of a streetlight, the white-haired man in the long coat paused, checking his watch with an air of quiet expectation. As to figures, a man in a suit and a young woman in a school uniform passed by, seemingly unaware of his presence. A glimmer of understanding dawned on the white-haired man's face, a subtle shift in his intense gaze suggesting a breakthrough. He realized that if he remained in darkness for 7 seconds, a soul marking would activate. He touched his own hand, a strange sensation building. The activation left him feeling intensely dizzy. The white-haired man realized with a chilling clarity that if he lost control, the conversation would take a drastic turn. A dark, ominous aura emanated, declaring his soul had been marked. The white-haired figure, a sinister grin playing on his lips, seemed to relish the other's dawning horror. The marked one, also with pale hair but disheveled, stared back with wide, fearful eyes as a digitized disruption flickered across his face, mirroring his inner turmoil. The scarred, white-haired man realized with a strange certainty that he could only perceive one particular face in the crowd. A shocked gasp escaped a nearby woman, who seemed to recognize his peculiar demeanor, exclaiming in disbelief about his chunibyo tendencies. The white-haired man winced, clutching his head as a piercing screech echoed in his mind beneath the streetlights. Time passed, the mysterious mark faded, and the white-haired man, his trench coat billowing slightly in the unseen breeze, found himself alone once more. The person he'd been observing vanished as if into thin air. The scarred man pondered, a flicker of understanding crossing his face, whether the presence of sunlight, an artificial light, had been shielding him from an unknown phenomenon. With a grim determination, the white-haired man realized he'd found the seat of the abyss, a dark power emanating from a disintegrating figure beside him. A cloaked figure with glowing red eyes loomed over a white-haired man, their words a dark promise of pursuit, while the man, seemingly resigned yet defiant, pondered the possibility of his location being discovered. The scarred warrior, eyes narrowed and glowing with an intense focus, braced himself, acutely aware of the imminent threat of a surprise attack. Driven by a fierce determination, the white-haired protagonist declared his intent to find his father, but a menacing, distorted figure materialized before him, vowing to prevent his escape. The woman with auburn hair glared at the dark-coated man as he dramatically exclaimed, seemingly dismissing her words. A speeding car swerved down the street, its tires ablur against the pavement. Several figures, dressed in various shades of gray and black, walked along the sidewalk, seemingly unaware of the vehicle's hasty approach. The silver-haired man emerged from the shadows, a car's headlights briefly illuminating him before he stepped fully into view. He mused grimly, aware of the elusive figure's aversion to light. The white-haired young man's face hardened as he processed his mother's words about the United Guilds becoming useless to the military. A chilling realization dawned on him. His father could be in grave danger. The scarred young man, his gaze hardened, contemplated the unknown number of powerful individuals within the shelter. A sense of foreboding hanging in the air as he considered the looming threat of a militarized force aligned with the formidable Tiger's Roar Guild. A chilling realization dawned upon the silver-haired man. There was a strong possibility someone was plotting to dismantle the United Guilds, a dangerous glint flashing in his eyes. Consumed by a shadowy, purple aura, the figure resolved to protect his parents, even if it meant a path of destruction for everyone else. Pausing amidst a desolate, gray landscape, someone's polished shoes hinted at a life once lived differently. Haunted by a wistful yearning for peace, the white-haired man questioned if those tranquil days were truly gone forever. The silver-haired man paused, a quiet HM, escaping his lips as he observed a group of dark-suited figures gathered before a stark, gray building. The scarred, silver-haired man leaned against a building, a grim satisfaction in his eyes as he realized he'd arrived at his destination. The silver-haired man pondered, a shadow of concern crossing his face, wondering how his father would handle the upcoming discussions. A man, his face a study in cool detachment, advised against resorting to violence unless absolutely necessary, his words laced with a chilling calmness. He reiterated his point, his voice low and almost gentle, emphasizing the last resort nature of physical confrontation. A reassuring hand rested on the young boy's head as he looked up, a determined glint in his eyes, and confirmed his understanding with a quiet "Okay, got it." The white-haired young man, a scar etching his cheek, watched with a calculating gaze, wondering if his adversary would stall until the very last second. A thoughtful HM escaped his lips, a hint of intrigue in his expression. Tension crackled in the air as the scarred young man's gaze hardened. A white-haired figure, clad in a dark coat, appeared, commanding others to clear the way as something ominous was about to begin. Two men in suits, faces partially hidden by sunglasses, exchanged excited glances, anticipating the impending action. A hush fell over the crowd as the boss's hand closed around the hilt of his sword, a weapon that hadn't seen the light of day for what felt like an eternity. With a fierce grimace and glowing eyes, the man in the dark suit unleashed a powerful, energy-laced attack. Eyes blazing with a fierce red glow, the dark-haired man growled Sakita, a challenge vibrating in the air. A hand, gripping a gleaming blade, sliced through the charged atmosphere, a silent command for Sakita to reveal himself. The blade hummed with power, cutting through the tense anticipation. With a defiant roar, a figure clad in dark attire unleashed a blinding energy blade, challenging an unseen opponent to face them. The force of the attack ripped through the urban landscape, sending shards of concrete and metal flying in a chaotic explosion. With a streak of white in his dark hair and eyes burning crimson, the man lunged forward, a whirlwind of motion and barely contained fury. The imposing, scarred man with long dark hair and a thick beard strode forward, a grim determination etched on his face as snow fell around him. His followers, clad in dark suits, raised their fist in a show of silent, menacing support. The spiky-haired young man, his face bearing a fresh scar, recoiled in stunned disbelief, his jaw dropping and eyes widening in a mixture of shock and confusion as he gasped, "Huh?" Beneath the bruised night sky, a figure stood amidst the rubble of a shattered building, a gleaming blade held loosely in his hand, its energy humming with barely contained power. Against a backdrop of towering city buildings, the sharply dressed man with the distinctive two-toned hair exhaled heavily, his grip tightening on a long, slender weapon as he prepared for the coming confrontation. A sharp hay cut through the tense air, drawing the attention of the suited man in sunglasses, his expression hardening as another figure approached. The scarred young man, sweat beading on his brow, asked his companion, a gruff figure in sunglasses if their boss had always been so intense. The man in sunglasses, his expression a mix of amusement and anticipation, informed his companions of their boss's notorious eagerness for a brawl. The silver-haired man questioned the group's usual approach of nonviolence, his voice laced with impatience. A shadowy figure with dark glasses reminisced about something the white-haired young man had once said, a hint of knowing amusement in his tone. The scarred youth, gaze steely yet distant, seemed lost in thought, his previous naive belief in the military's ability to resolve the situation a stark contrast to the present reality. Time had passed, and much had changed. The man with dark shades, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, seemed to imply that the military's priorities were clear. As long as the hunters kept the monsters at bay and the populace wasn't starving, petty squabbles among them were of little concern. He seemed to suggest that the authorities wouldn't waste resources on managing every minor conflict that flared up. The man in the suit, sunglasses glinting in the dim light, clenched his fist, exuding a chilling aura of authority as he explained to the scarred young man that actions speak louder than words, especially when words are useless against superior strength. The young man, his expression a mix of defiance and understanding, listened intently, a subtle shift in his gaze hinting at a newfound respect for the brutal logic presented. Amidst the rubble and dust of a shattered cityscape, a lone figure stood, his back to a gathering crowd, a simple philosophy echoing in the air, strike first, then parley. Observing the scarred, silver-haired man's intense gaze, someone pondered aloud whether truly powerful individuals, like the monk they'd witnessed, typically avoided conflict. Amidst a backdrop of urban decay, a tense confrontation brewed as one figure challenged another, questioning if immense power, like that of his father, granted the right to unrestrained chaos. The scarred young man, his eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and suspicion, stared at the blindfolded figure looming over him, the question of the man's blindness hanging heavy in the air. Under the cloak of a star-dusted night, a lone figure, cloaked and enigmatic, stood perched on the edge of a towering skyscraper. High above the ravaged cityscape, a lone figure in traditional garb stood watch as searchlights from descending helicopters cut through the smoky sky, illuminating the devastation below, and the fallen form of a giant, clad in green armor. Under the watchful gaze of the moon, Yukio Shuzenji, a level 75 arhat, stood poised, his hand resting on his chest. His keen eyes, now glowing with an otherworldly light, activated, signaling his readiness for what lay ahead. A colossal, level 90 boss, ripped asunder but strangely lacking any scorch marks from weaponry, lay sprawled before the awestruck soldiers. Adjusting his wide-brimmed hat, the monk, Yukio Shuzenji, mused about the daunting number of powerful individuals still at large, a grim understanding dawning on his face that caution was paramount. Smoke billowed from the ravaged skyscraper, its facade torn and scarred, hinting at the destructive forces unleashed within its walls. Tension thickened in the air as someone yelled Mukajima, the name echoing amongst a group of sharply dressed men, their faces grim and determined, while a man with a distinct streak of white in his hair and a katana at his hip stood at the forefront, his gaze hard and unwavering. A man in futuristic armor stood before a group of hardened individuals, his raised finger punctuating an accusation of some treachery. Below, another man's face contorted with rage as he roared a furious insult at the armored figure, his question dripping with sarcasm about the changing times since the evacuation shelters were established. With a menacing glare, the dark-haired man in the suit seethed, blaming the unseen recipient of his anger for the upheaval that had occurred since their arrival. Gripping his sword tightly, a figure loomed over a group of armored individuals, his words dripping with venomous regret. He should have ended their lives long ago. The scarred man's cruel smile widened as he taunted his opponent, challenging him to act now if he wasn't afraid. A scarred man, his dark hair streaked with gray, reacted to something unseen with a mixture of curiosity and unease, finding himself unable to look away. Based on the image provided and knowing the context of the red shirt Manhwa, a surge of power crackled around the warrior's hand as he gripped his sword, the blade humming with an ominous energy. The scarred man, face contorted in a grimace, roared his challenge, convinced he'd pushed his unseen foe to the limit. Sweating and with a grim determination, he questioned whether his provocations had fallen short, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. Tension crackled in the air as the man in white, his back to us, beads of sweat trickling down his neck, pointed accusingly at the sharply dressed figure before him, a katana held loosely at his side, and taunted him for his cowardice, the unspoken challenge hanging heavy amidst the silent, watchful crowd of suited men. A man's face contorted in a furious roar, his words echoing a chilling sentiment about someone becoming fuel for a tiger's rage. He punctuated his threat with a sharp, challenging question. With a furious cry of "You scum!" the masked figure lunged, the blade a blur of motion aimed at their opponent's exposed back. As a spectral, winged figure loomed above, A man in dark pants and a light jacket, blurred with motion, swung a glowing blade with a sharp, ripping sound. A sinister grin spread across the shadowed figure's face as he realized his opponent had fallen for his trap. With a fierce determination, a scarred warrior bellowed a warning, forbidding further approach. As the crowd watched, a dark-clad warrior lunged, his blade aimed at the armored figure who deflected the blow with a glowing shield. Osamu Usui, a level 63 assassin, looked up with a grim expression, clearly disapproving of the brawl that had erupted within the supposed safety of the shelter. Alarm rippled through the group as the white-haired man, Usui, appeared, his presence sparking suspicion about his allegiance to the Tigers' Roar faction. The white-haired man's gaze sharpened, a flicker of recognition in his eyes as he questioned if the soldier present was the one backing the infamous Tigers' Roar. He immediately dismissed the possibility of coincidence, suspicion hardening his expression. Standing before a damaged building under the twilight sky, the white-haired man sensed a multitude of presences within. The grizzled man in the cap realized with dawning horror that someone's presence was no mere accident. A spectral, winged figure materialized behind a man in tactical gear, radiating an ominous aura. Bracing himself, a muscular man raised a glowing shield, his face grim with determination as the first man approached. Below, on the steps, another man gripped a long, red staff, his posture suggesting impending action. A sharply dressed man narrowed his eyes, a flicker of suspicion in his gaze as he wondered if the soldier was truly behind the Tigers' Roar. Article 15 of the Temporary Shelter Security Act clearly stated dueling was forbidden. To guards, one carrying a gleaming, futuristic shield, looked on as another figure, back turned, seemingly contemplating the implications. The stern warning echoed in the stark shelter, detailing the potential punishment for those who dared to break the law, imprisonment for 15 days or more, depending on the severity of the duel. The grim threat of death hung heavy in the air as Mukajima, his face shadowed, was offered a stark choice: comply or face execution. A sly smile played on his lips as the question of his obedience hung unanswered, leaving his intentions shrouded in mystery. With a grim realization, he understood his opponent's cunning tactic to goad him into reaction, then exploit the law to bring him down. The man in simple work clothes realized with dawning horror that his superior, clad in gleaming armor, was not only unconcerned about his exposed corruption, but was actively and brazenly attempting to frame him for it. A grim realization dawned on the man with the distinctive white streak in his hair. Once imprisoned, his sentence could be stretched indefinitely, or worse, he could vanish in a staged accident. Amidst a chaotic clash, someone, seemingly confident in their importance, mused that their loss would leave the United Guilds vulnerable to Tigers' Roar and other looming threats. A glowing shield, held aloft by dark-suited figures, deflected an incoming attack as a white-haired man watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. A worried thought bubbled up, questioning the military's motives and if a power struggle was brewing within its ranks. As to officers, a woman with long, light hair and a man with shorter, similarly toned hair, stood in thoughtful silence, a strange light glimmering between them. The man in the dark suit, his face etched with suspicion and a hint of fear, pondered his adversary's motives, refusing to confess to any wrongdoing. The sharply dressed man, his hand resting on his katana, smoothly denied any duel had taken place, a sly smirk playing on his lips as he addressed the unseen questioner. While a crowd of suited figures stood silently in the background and another man with light hair listened intently. The sharply dressed man, his face etched with a stubborn defiance, declared his allegiance to the United Guilds and his refusal to confess to any crime without concrete proof. Against a backdrop of a scarred building, a man in work attire pointed emphatically towards the damage, his wide grin suggesting a smug awareness, declaring the sword marks undeniable proof of something significant. The sharply dressed man, his features contorted in a mixture of disbelief and sardonic amusement, muttered, "You have to be joking," his eyes flitting over the assembled group of dark-suited figures. Acknowledging the presented evidence, the dark-haired man smoothly countered that the destruction was merely part of his building renovation, not a duel as implied. The sharply dressed man, hand resting on his katana's hilt, looked down at the other, his tone implying a dangerous lack of comprehension. The man in the cap, with a smug grin, asserted his authority, declaring that the decision rested solely with him. He further emphasized his point, implying that his word alone determined the nature of the evidence, presumably a sword, hinting at a duel. The grizzled man in the lab coat declared with grim satisfaction that his opponent had already lost the moment they entered, as shadowy figures with weapons lined the windows of the damaged building. The sharply dressed man, sweat beading on his brow, was commanded to surrender and submit to arrest. The sharply dressed man, likely a leader judging by the concerned cries of "boss" from his suited and shirtless entourage, strode forward with a grim determination. One of his men, distinguished by a light cap, looked up at him with a desperate plea not to lose. Based on the context of red shirt, A palpable tension filled the air as the dark-haired man, his expression grim, declared that if their opponents were ready, they should be met head-on. A voice, seemingly from a more cautious subordinate, urged restraint. Under the pale moonlight, two figures discussed the precarious situation, aware that their targets were too close for a safe attack. A sinister chuckle echoed from below as a third figure, the assassin, a level 63 threat, looked up with a predatory grin, clearly relishing the dangerous proximity. The dark-haired man assessed his opponent, a level 63, and mused on the difficulty of stopping such swift foes. A sudden thought, a desperate gambit, sparked in his mind. Taking a hostage named Sakita might be their only way out. Just as quickly, a formidable, glowing weapon loomed large, held by a fierce, scarred man with wide eyes and a desperate expression, seemingly confirming the first man's suspicion of imminent danger. A gleaming blade sliced through the air, wielded with grim determination. The warrior's face hardened, eyes focused on his target with a chilling intensity. A scar etched across his brow pulsed, a testament to battles past, as he braced for the impending clash, murmuring, "Here it comes." With a fierce determination etched on his face, the armored warrior raised his shield, bracing for impact, vowing not to be the weakest link. The scarred warrior's sharp gaze hardened as he absorbed the knowledge that his agent class gave him a unique defensive edge, allowing him to dissect and predict incoming attacks with chilling precision. Confidently gripping his sheathed sword, the dark-haired man calculated he could deflect the attack from a distance, his opponent's strained face visible beyond his glowing shield. The scarred warrior gripped his shield, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he explained its unique ability. A sword shield could only block swords, but against a blade, its power amplified far beyond its apparent level. A warrior deflected a fierce blow from a level 69 opponent, his shield flashing brightly. A seasoned observer scoffed, unimpressed by the level 65 warrior's attack, deeming it insignificant. Mukajima unleashes a powerful, glowing shield, deflecting a fierce blow from his masked adversary. He confidently declares the shield impenetrable, certain of his defense against the attack. With a ferocious roar and a face streaked with blood, the scarred man bellowed at Mukajima, demanding his surrender. The officer, a cruel smirk twisting his face, offered a chilling ultimatum: surrender peacefully or be imprisoned with his comrades. The man in the dark suit, a streak of white in his slicked back hair, stared down, a weighty decision hanging heavy in the somber atmosphere. A group of men in suits, their faces grim and determined, rushed forward, shouting "Boss," as if alerted to sudden danger or an urgent command. The dark-haired man, his face etched with grim determination, braced himself as power crackled around him. Under the cloak of a dusky city night, a figure's hands gripped the hilt of a katana, the faint sound of metal against leather a subtle promise of impending action. With a surge of power, the dark-haired man gripped his katana, the blade a stark contrast against the twilight sky, as shadowy figures loomed around him. A scarred and imposing figure, likely a leader, roared with apparent fury, addressed as boss by a subordinate. Someone, seemingly having made a difficult choice, was praised for their wise decision by an unseen speaker. The man in the cap, with a chillingly wide grin, seemed to relish the situation, his decision seemingly having dire consequences. Tension hung thick in the air as someone questioned the bearded man's previous actions, wondering if a recent display of force had been a mere bluff. The suited men sneered, convinced they were being mocked. Another voice fiercely defended their leader, insisting his questionable actions were for their own protection. Tension crackled in the air as a warrior with spiky hair registered the boss's silent command, a raised sword, a signal to prepare for the imminent attack. A surge of power crackled around the imposing figure in the tailored suit, a smug certainty in his stance as he realized the advantage he and his boss held, a secret weapon unseen by their unaware adversaries. Under a stormy sky, the man in the dark vest summoned a glowing, ornate sword, his gestures sharp and precise as the other man watched. The scarred man roared in disbelief as his weapon vanished into thin air. With a fierce glint in his eyes, the dark-haired man lunged forward, his attack aimed directly at the other man's gleaming shield. Confidently, the older man braced himself against the incoming attack, his shield glowing with a protective spell specifically designed to counter sword strikes. With a fierce glint in his crimson eyes, the man with the distinctive two-toned hair grasped his glowing blade, preparing to unleash its power. A scarred man's face twisted into a cruel smirk, his eyes glinting with dark amusement as he scoffed at the seemingly impossible feat before him, questioning how anyone could hope to penetrate a shield that even a level 69 couldn't breach. With a fierce grimace, the dark-haired, bearded man unleashed a surge of power, his hands outstretched as if to seize the very air around him. The ground cracked and buckled, sending shards of rock flying through the air as an unseen force erupted. With a determined grimace, the dark-haired man, shielded by a translucent barrier, brought down a gleaming blade, cleaving through the rocky ground with a resounding crack. With a guttural cry and a flash of motion, the armored warrior launched a powerful upward punch, meeting the dark-clad figure's downward strike head-on, sending shards of energy scattering through the air. A man in a dark suit, his face contorted in a grimace of pain and shock, realized with dawning horror that his assailant had wielded not a blade, but a brutal hammer. With a chilling glint in his eye, the scarred man, wielding a dark energy and katana, lunged at his unseen foe, shards of power swirling around him. With a sudden, sharp awareness, the man in the cap declared he knew his opponent's true intentions. A fierce warning hung in the air, punctuated by the threat of execution, as a figure in dark clothing lunged forward, debris swirling around him in a vortex of motion. Another individual, clad in lighter attire, braced for the impact, his face a mask of grim determination as he prepared to counter the imminent attack. With a surge of power and a fierce roar, the bearded warrior bellowed stop, his hand outstretched as if to halt an unseen force. A figure, seemingly trapped amidst a cage of dark, crackling energy spears, desperately tried to deflect them. A powerful, shadowy blade sliced through the air, aiming to shatter the energy prison. A shard of dark stone, imbued with an ominous glow, hurtled towards the man's face, his features twisting in a grimace of surprise and anger. Amidst a chaotic scene of crumpling debris and swirling dust, a dark-haired man extended a glowing hand towards a powerful, armored figure, while panic shouts urged others to kill the seemingly crazed armored man. With a guttural roar and the command activate, the imposing, dark-suited man unleashed a surge of power. A massive, dark, blade-like object materialized, slicing through the air with a deafening screech, forcing a white-shirted figure to desperately scramble for cover. Another figure, clad in camouflage, was sent sprawling backwards by the sheer force of the attack, landing hard on the ravaged ground. A cunning plan sparked in the man's mind: immobilize their powerful foe, then make a swift escape. A startled warrior recoiled, a cry of what? Escaping his lips as a glowing hand reached out from below. With a determined grimace, the man in the white shirt unleashed a powerful, glowing strike that tore through the air towards the ground, leaving a visible trail of energy. The dark-haired man moved swiftly, a grim determination etched on his face. A voice echoed, revealing a shadowy figure accusing the man's ally of trapping him within a stone prison of shadows. The shadowed figure held a dark, angular object, his expression a mix of anger and malice. Having marked the lingering magic on the shattered remnants of Sakita's shield, the strategist relayed his findings amidst the grim, rubble-strewn battlefield, where a lone figure stood defiantly before a backdrop of armed soldiers. A researcher, his back turned to the tense scene, held up a device, seemingly scanning the area for magical residue. A thrill of triumph coursed through him as he realized he'd finally unlocked the coveted assassin's skill. Shadow trance, amidst a chaotic scene of dark, jagged forms. With a smug grin, the older man in the cap declared his opponent's defeat now that their hostage was gone. The defeated man, bruised and tense, looked on in disbelief and dawning horror as a dark aura began to swirl around him. With a manic grin, the man in the light uniform lunged forward, hand outstretched, declaring his intent to finish the fight. Overcome with shock and disbelief, the man with the headband gasped, "What?" The scarred, bearded man's eyes widened in stunned disbelief, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple as he recognized something or someone unthinkable. The soldiers, clad in camouflage and gripping their weapons, reacted with shock and alarm at the sudden appearance of the director. The man in the cap, amidst a backdrop of stark buildings, questioned someone's evident surprise with a cynical edge. Baskerville, amidst swirling violet energy, questioned the stunned onlookers about their evident surprise, his tone laced with a sardonic edge. Alarm flared in the officer's eyes as a chilling realization washed over him. Someone had slipped behind him, an assassin silently appearing, as if from thin air, prompting a frantic question about who this unexpected backup Mukajima had called for. Tension crackled in the air as the protagonist, his face shadowed, recognized an immediate threat despite not knowing the identity of the newcomer. Driven by the instinct of survival, he grimly accepted the need to use a desperate, unnamed measure, knowing the first strike held the key to victory. With a soft, rustling sound, a figure clutched a small, intricately carved vial, the contents shimmering within. A scarred man reacted with stunned disbelief, recognizing a deadly technique. Another character realized with alarm that this powerful poison, meant for a formidable boss, was now in the wrong hands, questioning how it was stolen. With a fierce yell of "Let go!" a blurred figure lunged forward, striking a staggering blow that sent the armored man reeling back with a choked gasp. Based on the Manhwa red shirt, a fierce clash erupted as the protagonist, clad in his signature red attire, deflected a flurry of attacks with his blades, a burst of white energy radiating from the impact. Amidst a backdrop of towering buildings, a man in a suit bellowed Sora's name, his face contorted in a mixture of shock and desperation. A man in light-colored attire recoiled in horror, a dark, swirling aura engulfing him as he realized the devastating consequences of someone's reckless actions. Alarmed, a soldier stared at a creeping, unnatural fog, his words barely a whisper of fear as he questioned its nature. As a sinister purple haze spread across the battlefield, a desperate cry rang out, urging the soldiers in gray uniforms to retreat from the encroaching poison. One soldier, already succumbing to its effects, clutched his throat, his face contorted in pain as the deadly fumes enveloped him. The scarred man, cloaked in shadows and swirling dark energy, grimly acknowledged the death of Mukajima's ally, a small victory in a situation he clearly found distasteful. A colossal, shadowy hand descended with menacing speed. Below, a figure in pale attire recoiled in startled alarm, dark energy swirling around him as if repelled by the approaching threat. He stumbled back, his outstretched hand a desperate attempt to ward off the inevitable, while another figure, smaller and less distinct, scrambled away in terror. A surge of disbelief rippled through the observer as the poisoned figure, his face a gruesome mask of pain and decay, unexpectedly twitched. A chilling realization dawned that the poison, potent enough to fell a level 90 boss, hadn't entirely done its work. A surge of dread washed over the man in the baseball cap as a chilling premonition gripped him, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Under the ominous glow of a massive moon, a figure, his face half shrouded in shadow and a single, glowing purple eye visible, was declared a monster, his dark aura radiating power as he loomed over fallen figures. A grim-faced man in dark clothing stood amidst the carnage, his posture tense, suggesting a hard-won victory.